I'd just like to welcome y'all here, and boy, am I happy with this crowd. I just like a lot of new smiling faces out there and ready to hit the ground running and appropriate that money. But anyway, my name is David Thompson. I am the Quorum Port Association president. We'll get into a little bit more of the structure of our organization a little bit later and everything, but just like to welcome you here and appreciate y'all making the trip in the inclement weather that we have. I'm from up the north part of Boone County, so I may get to see it all on the way home. So, but anyway, first of all, let me introduce some of the AAC, Association of Arkansas County staff that we have here today. We've got Lindsay Bailey as counsel for the AAC. She is actually our Quorum Court liaison. She's kind of our contact person, if you will, and due to us having a lot of legal questions, it's really good to have an attorney as our liaison. And like I say, if she doesn't know it off the top of her head, her phone is really fast. So anyway, and then Josh Curtis, he's the head director of governmental affairs and kind of the, I guess, political action direction of our organization. And Christy Smith is our communications director. She's in charge of the magazine that the association prints and lots of other things as well. The only thing that, a point that I would just like to make to everybody, and I have experienced this myself, as a JP, or as a human being, sometimes we want things to be a certain way. And, you know, don't confuse me with the facts. I know what I believe. Well, I would encourage you to find out the facts, find out the truth, investigate your own ideas so you know you are correct and you are truthful. And the staff down here helps us. The procedural manual that you have, that's a lot of parliamentary procedure. It covers everything pretty much that we will do. There is also an Amendment 55, is a constitutional amendment that organized us as we are today. I believe in 77 or 1977 or 78, last century, you know. They passed this, and we have in Arkansas, it's pretty unique. We have the same three branches in the county as we do in the state, as we do on the federal level. You have the judicial, the executive, and the legislative branch. We are the legislative branch for the counties. And thereby, there is that separate but equal separation of powers. So, this is our job. Running the treasurer's office or the sheriff's office is not our job. The finances, Mike Rainwater with Rainwater, Holt, and Sexton, there's a big firm that works with the association as well. He always reminds us of a lot of good things, and I'll just let him remind us a little bit later on. But like I said, let the truth and the facts be your guide, not necessarily your opinion. Your opinion starts the search, but the facts have to be what determine the outcome. And like I said, from personal experience, I really wanted a couple of things to be a certain way, and they weren't. So I had to realize that it wasn't. At this point, we have a short introductory video about the association and everything. It's just like a minute or two long, and then we'll get back into the rest of the program.
Good morning, Justices. My name is Chris Lyons. I'm the Executive Director here at the Association of Arkansas Counties. I wish I could be there with you today. Unfortunately, I'm traveling. And wanted to reach out to you just so you see who I am, you get to know me, because we're looking forward to working with you in your new role as a Justice of the Peace. Congratulations to all of you for being elected to your jobs, one of the most important jobs in county government. So as I begin, I just want to tell you that being a Justice of the Peace is near and dear to me. Both both of my grandparents served as justices of the peace, one in Boone County and one in Pulaski County. And so I have always admired and respected them for the work that they did. I want to tell you that your job's important, your role is important, and I really look forward to you learning what you need to know to go back home and be the most effective justice of the peace that you can be. You have tremendous leadership in your organization. Soon I will turn this over to David Thompson, who is the president of the statewide justice organization, the Quorum Court Association of Arkansas. And David is very capable and does a wonderful job leading you all and guiding you. We also have many staff members here from the Association of Arkansas Counties. I encourage you to reach out, get to know them, meet them. You have many, many resources in this room that we want you to walk away. And if you remember anything from today, remember their names and their phone numbers and give them a call when you have any question as you move down this road. So again, I'd like to say welcome aboard. We look forward to serving you. We're here for you. This is a county building, and we are happy to help you as you begin down this path. Thank you.
All right, and I did not introduce him because he just did. He is the director of the AAC. He's a very capable individual. He's moved up through the system. He's served in some elected positions over the years before he was director. And like I said, the main thing that we are about here is obviously helping all of county government, but my focus is helping JPs. And I'll make my name and number available. Anybody can call me. I've been a JP for 10 or 12 years and got a little bit of experience, but hey, we never stop learning, you know that. At this time, we have a topic overview of the auditing process. I sent some of the green books. These are the same things. If we've got a few of these, we got some back there, we've got some here. It's just an example of the audit that the state does every year. And this happens to be an example of Crawford County. They must have done everything right, I'm figuring. But anyway, I think we use them for an example every time. But anyway, it's just an example of the procedure. Tim Jones with the Arkansas Legislative Audit is here to give you kind of an overview, and potentially we might have time for questions. We really think questions and answers are important through this whole thing because, you know, was it Radio Shack, we've got answers or something like that? Well, we've got questions. We don't have answers, but they have the answers. So I'll turn it over to Tim Jones now. Thanks, sir.
Good morning. I appreciate the AAC giving me a chance to come visit with you. More than likely, there's a good chance I'll have a conversation on the phone with some of you as time goes on. I am Tim. I'm with Legislative Audit, and I'll kind of touch on what I do as we go. I'm here to kind of give you a little bit of overview of Legislative Audit, who we are, what we do, where you may find some resources from us. I grew up in Batesville, all but about a couple of years. There was when I was about 10 years old, we moved to Jacksonville because my dad took a job in Little Rock. And I remember we moved, and of course, everything was different. That particular month, August of 1977, Elvis died, you know. I go to a new school, and the school I went to was Pinewood Elementary. And the thing that was different about it was pretty new at the time, newly built. But there were no walls for the classrooms. There were walls for the restrooms and the office and that kind of stuff. And I remember the classes were separated by columns for the building, you know, that supported the building, and chalkboards and tow trays where we put our books and things like that. And I remember the first day or two, I think I walked through another classroom not knowing not understanding where the hallways were. It took me a day or two to see that. So what I'm hoping today is kind of just show you where the hallways are of Legislative Audit. So if you have some questions or maybe some places to go for answers and that kind of thing. thank you for your service. You know, I've been in Arkansas all my life, and so you folks serve us, and you know, you're taking your time and risking your life today, I guess, if you're from the north part of the state, coming to be here with us. But anyway, as we go, you'll see legislative audit in the news sometimes, and usually it's when something went wrong somewhere. I don't know if any of you are familiar with this. I know in a group like this, probably there's some of you that have been tied to a school district that we've audited, or a higher education, or maybe a city. In a group like this, this is not your first time to serve in most cases. You've been involved in the community somewhere, and so you may be familiar with this, and you know, we're auditors. We want people to like us, but it doesn't always work out that well for us sometimes. But anyway, just kind of go through some of the things we do. As with the name, legislative audit, we work for the legislature. Actually, we work for a committee of the legislature. And we do audits of state agencies, and we do audits of cities. There are 501 municipalities in the state, and we do reports on about 460, 462, something like that. By law, we do all 75 counties. We also do educational institutions. We do most of your public school districts. We do all the public higher education institutions. And we also do special reports for the legislature at times. So here's the makeup of the Legislative Joint Audit Committee. There's 40 legislators on it. As you can see, 16 senators, 20 representatives, and then you've got the pro tem of the Senate, the Speaker of the House, and some past co-chairs of the committee, and the co- and vice chairs of Legislative Council. We have 3 standing committees, and the way this works, basically, legislative audit is broke up into 3 subcommittees, or standing committees. One is on state agencies, the other is on cities and counties, which your reports go to, and the other is for educational institutions. So we meet the second Friday of every month, and then the preceding Thursday. This month, we're going to meet next Thursday and Friday. So the standing committees meet at 1:30 on a Thursday afternoon, and the full committees, I think they meet at 9:30 on Friday morning. And so I say every month, when there's a legislative session, we're not in session, and we usually don't meet in July and August as well. So there'll be a few months every year we don't meet. Key personnel. The legislative auditor is Mr. Roger Norman, and the deputy legislative auditor for cities and counties is Marty Steele. And I'm basically her right-hand person. This is a little bit about us. We have 263 professional staff. That's those in Little Rock and those all over the state. 169 of us are CPAs. 50 are certified fraud examiners, 11 are certified financial forensics, and 13 are CISA folks, they're IS people, and we have 3 attorneys. So we do try to maintain a professional staff, and we encourage our people to gain those certifications. Just kind of walk through what goes on in an audit. Being on the quorum report, you should get a letter in the mail saying we're beginning the work. It's your particular county. And our field auditors will show up, and they'll go to work. And at the end of that work, they'll have an exit conference with the officials where they'll go over what they found, and then they'll be submitted for review. And we have an electronic work paper system, so sometimes this is getting a little more efficient than it has been in the past, but there'll be supervisory review. And sometimes that review is almost completed by the time your audit is. And then after the supervisory review, if we need to, we'll have a second final exit. We don't always have those because sometimes that review is complete during it'll be the time they finish your audit work, it's almost the final. You can have a final exit instead of a preliminary. And then the report will go to Little Rock for review, and then it goes to the Legislative Joint Audit Committee. So that's kind of just real quickly how that works. And as we go on, if you've got any questions, and I think I later I'm gonna talk about some common findings. Please just raise your hand, and we're having a conversation here this morning. And so, just anytime you have questions, feel free to ask. Okay, one of the things let's do, we handed out this green document is a county audit report. I'm just kind of gonna walk through that for a minute, point out some places where there's some information for you. The reason you have Crawford County is the first report I came to that it didn't have findings. And we have several reports that don't have findings. Some people accuse us that, you know, you're always gonna find something. That's, we usually do find something, but it doesn't always end up in the report. Sometimes we'll have supplemental issues that are not worthy, we don't think worthy of being in the report. But just to this point in, we have finished, or we've completed completed 36 2017 audits. And we've got, I've got another 6 on my desk, so we're, you know, that tells you we're gonna have more than 40 into past my review by the end of the year. And that's kind of ahead of schedule because most of the others are gonna come real early the next month. Here's the thing, we have, all of our auditors have to do all these other audits as well. They've got to do city audits, they've got to do school district audits, and so sometimes these reports, that's why it takes a little while to get those in. And I'll just tell you about what works just a little bit as far as what I do. I'm the audit manager, which I'm the right-hand person to Ms. Marty Steele, who's she's the deputy for cities and counties. And so my job is I'm a kind of a go-between between her and the supervisors. And so I help the supervisors with different things, sometimes helping them decide on procedures. Most of the time, it's on things that are going to be in the report. It's findings. All the reports for cities and counties that end up going to the committee cross my desk. So pretty much every finding I take a look at. And so we're going to get into that in just a minute. But this report, back to the report, this is a good piece of information for you. And let's just kind of walk through it. Here on the first page, you open up, it's table of contents. That's pretty self-explanatory. And if you go to the next page, the title of that document is Independent Auditor's Report. This is commonly referred to as the opinion. And then pretty much, unless things go really wrong in your county, what you're going to see in here, this is an opinion on the financial statements. You're going to see a unmodified opinion on the regulatory basis of the county, and you'll see an adverse opinion on generally accepted audit accounting principles. The reason we do that is all the counties in the state use the regulatory basis of the county. It's a little bit easier to understand if you've ever, especially for this size of government. Anyway, so that's what you're going to see there most of the time. If things go really wrong, maybe you'll see, you might see an adverse opinion on the regulatory basis. That means the records were bad, and we rarely have that, actually. The next document is called the Report on Internal Controls, and if you have findings, it's going to be in this document. This is probably the most read portion of the audit report. There's a lot of information there, but that's where people go to, that's what they're interested in our reports. Moving on from that is Exhibit A. It's the balance sheet of this particular county. You'll notice there's 3 columns there. There's a column for the general fund, the road fund, and other funds in the aggregate. And probably the interesting thing on this document that is of importance to you, being JPs, being involved in the budget, being the purse keepers, basically, of county government, is the fund balances. Now, that is not telling you that's money in the bank. That's the difference, you know, between the assets and liabilities there. But those fund balances have designations, and those are kind of important to you. In some reports, you're going to see a non-spendable fund balance. There's not one in this one. And what that means is it's not spendable. Most of the time, it's someone's given money for a trust, and they say you can have the money, but you can only use what is earned. Okay, the principal stays intact. There's not many of those out there, but there are a few in counties. And so just letting you know that the next one you will see, and this one is restricted. What that means is it's restricted by something outside the control of the county. Either there's a state law that restricts certain money, or there is a grant that came from someone outside the county, or maybe your voters passed a sales tax that is restricted by the ballot. So this is outside the control of anybody in the county government per se. There is another classification you don't see here, but you see in most counties. It's called committed. And what that means, it's restricted by the highest level of county law, which is an ordinance. So if you restrict something by a resolution, it's not going to be here. It's going to be in something less than that. So that's what committed is. You can just look at that and say somewhere an ordinance is restricting this money. The next one you see here is assigned, and that means the county decided to assign that particular money or money in that fund for a certain purpose. Could be restricted by a resolution. It could be just you guys decide to put it in a certain fund for a particular reason, but it's something you decided and you can change it. Okay? And then the most interesting, or the one you're most probably interested in, is unassigned. And you're only going to see that fund balance in the general fund unless it has a negative fund balance somewhere else. And that means it can be used for any legal purpose that the county uses money for. So that's some interesting piece of information. Now, you're going to see this. You may go back and look at your 17 report. So this information is not up to date, but it's going to give you an idea of what kind of money's there. Now, just give you a heads up, like in the road fund, most of that money is restricted, and that's where we see problems. That's going to be one of the common findings we'll see, is that some counties will want to use money out of the road fund. And most of the money in the road fund comes from the county property tax that's set aside for roads, or it comes from the state turnback that's set aside for roads. And so by law, you can't use that money for anything else, okay? And so what happens sometimes is people get into trouble in the general fund, and we see it where they'll loan money over there, and that's going to be a finding every time we know about it. We're pretty much going to know about it every time. So anyway, just the heads up on that. The next next document you'll see is Exhibit B, which is basically an income statement. Still the same columns: general fund, road fund, other funds in the aggregate. And the next document is Exhibit C, and it is a comparison of the final budget of the general fund and the road fund to the actual expenditures. So those actual expenditures are going to come straight from Exhibit B, from the general and road fund column. Now you're kind of wondering about this other funds in the aggregate. That's all other funds of the county. And if you, we'll go to it in a minute, but in the back there's a schedule that details those other funds in the aggregate. Tells every fund that's there, and does it by balance sheet and general fund. We'll see that in a second. That's a good piece of information for you as well. So moving on, the next section of the notes is the notes to the financial statements. And there's a few things that you probably want to be familiar with. The regulatory basis of the county does not have long-term liabilities on the face of the financial statements, nor does it have your capital assets, your infrastructure, and your buildings, and your equipment, and all that kind of stuff. And so there's a note in here called commitments, where we have things like your long-term liabilities, these large non-cancelable leases that are over a period of several years. Pretty much all of them are going to see a reappraisal contract in this note, and then any construction contracts that are going on for a while. But here in Crawford County, if you'll notice, that's on page 15 there, you'll see their long-term liabilities. They have about $14.8 million in sales and use tax bonds, and then they have a note payable for about $108,000. And so that's a critical piece of information when, you just need to know what the long-term debt is. And then, there's details of how that's going to pay out there, and the debt service requirements to maturity on the next page. And so that is a very good and critical piece of information to have for someone looking over the finances of the county. If you'll flip on over to page 19, you're going to see a note at the bottom, note 15, refers to the Arkansas Public Employees Retirement System. Counties in this state use the Arkansas Public Employees Retirement System. Probably is a major carrot to keep county employees, actually. And so, but a few years ago, the accounting rules makers made a rule where you have to put the net pension liabilities of your pension plans on the face of the financial statements. And if you're in a part of a larger pension plan, like all the counties in the state are part of the Arkansas Public Employees Retirement System, you have to put their particular share of that liability. And so, what we did, since that's not part of the regulatory base of the county, we put a note to the financial statements to give that information. If you notice, those are some large numbers. There is a paragraph down at the very bottom called net pension liability, and Crawford County's share is about $8.7 million. But there, if you'll notice in the paragraph right before that, they paid in $876,000 and some change toward that liability every year. So that's a large expense, payroll expense of the county, but that's a good piece of information for those of you who are watching the finances of the county, just so you know that. As we move on to the next doc, Schedule 1 and 2 is what I described earlier. This details the other funds in there for both the balance sheet and the special revenue fund Schedule 2. So there's some good information, and probably if I were a JP, if I were a new JP, the document on page 30, beginning on page 30, which is notes to schedules to 1 and 2, this gives a description of all the funds and other funds in aggregate. It tells what those funds are for. It tells, you know, most of them are restricted by law. It gives you a code reference where you can go look at that. And so that, if it were me, this would, I'd want to keep this really close during budget time. They're just, it's not me, but it's what I would do. And then the last page, schedule 4-1 through 4-3, that's basically some trend information over the last 5 years on some very general financial information. Total assets, liabilities, other financing sources, uses, total expenditures, and revenues there. You can see trend information. So that's some good information in here. So I'm going to move real quickly. I'm just going to go through some common findings. And, oh, by the way, any audit report you want to see that we put out since 1999 is on our website, www.arclegaudit.gov. And when you receive this in the mail, one of the job of the quorum court is that you're going to receive, let's say your audit is going this next week on Thursday. Well, we put these audits in the mail to all the quorum court members and county officials yesterday. So on Monday or Tuesday, if you were on the quorum court right now, and your audit was going this month, you'd get a copy of this report. But what state law says, at the meeting following, when you receive this report, you've got to go over it and document in the minutes that you reviewed the audit and the officials, what they're going to do to correct any findings if they were in the report. There is a 10-day exception, so if you receive the audit within 10 days of your next quorum court meeting, you can wait one more. But basically, you get the report, you've got to go over your next quorum court meeting. All right, here's some common county audit issues. And these really haven't changed over a lot of years. I've done this presentation, I don't know, 3 or 4 times, maybe more. And sometimes the order changes, but these are pretty much the same issues we talk about every time. First are what I call payment issues, and that's kind of a hodgepodge, but they're kind of all the same. Maybe county paid vendors in advance for goods or services. Saw situations where you had a full-time employee that was also working as a part-time employee. They didn't have that documented real well, so we didn't really know what was accrued for the employee to be paid. We've seen where they had a couple of times where they had a school resource officer that was employed with the county and with the school, and there wasn't really an agreement between the two on who pays for what. I think we had one where they were full-time both places. Then we had the issue where, time cards weren't handled correctly. We saw where they paid vendors without a contract, that kind of stuff. That's what I mean by payment issues. The next are information systems issues. This is common, and it's getting more important all the time. This means maybe the county didn't have a disaster recovery plan. I don't remember, several years ago, was it Clark County where the courthouse was just wiped off the block? And they were up and I think it was, and they were up and running so quickly because they had a disaster recovery plan. And that's pretty important when you're providing services to your citizens. Maybe you didn't have a business continuity plan, maybe your remote access security wasn't very good, maybe your password controls weren't very good. Those kind of things are common. Not only is it because if something goes wrong and you have a disaster, but it could be, we've got hackers all over the place now. Not within the last year, we had hackers hack into the sheriff's records and take their records ransom. We had a phishing situation more than a year ago where somebody hacked into the system, spoofed the county judge's email, sent an email to the county treasurer, and said, I want you to pay this bill online. There's another thing behind that. And the treasurer did it without talking to the county judge, and they lost $28,000 because it was fraudulent. In a city government, it's been 7, 8, 9 years ago, we had hackers from Russia hack in and to the banking records and take $200,000. They've never seen it since. And so, and that, it sounds like a lot of money, but that's probably an amount that the FBI is probably not going to chase for you. In this particular case, the bank had determined it wasn't security on their end, it was security on the city's end, so they were out that money. And so that's why we write up those things. If people don't like us writing those findings, we get probably more gripes about that than anything else, but it is an important issue. Now, on the other side of it, in the last month, I've got 2 phone calls yesterday from 2 different cities where somebody's doing an old-fashioned check fraud, where they basically have a copy of the county's check somewhere and buy a batch of checks, put the in this case it's with cities, put their routing number and account number on it and deposit the check. And away they went, had the money. And so we've got old and new fraud all working all the time. But anyway, moving on, bid issues. Basically, the county just flat out didn't bid purchases more than that are greater than $20,000. They didn't handle it correctly in some way. Maybe they didn't publish the bids, or maybe there are some exemptions in the county law to bidding, and maybe they didn't handle those right, or maybe they, however, but that's the bidding issues is very common, has been for years. Article 12, Section 5, you're gonna have to do an oath where you're gonna support however the wording was, the Arkansas Constitution. Article 12, Section 5 of the Arkansas Constitution says you can't give public money to a private individual, association, or corporation. Can't do it. And sometimes, you know what? It may be a good thing to do. You know, we've written up folks for county where they gave money, what they'll do is they'll give money to a private organization mostly without a contract. You can have a contract with a private organization to provide a service that the county usually would provide. So if you have a county that's going to provide a youth sports association, you can do that. Say you're doing it with the Optimist Club or whoever. You can do that as long as you have a contract, but you can't just give the Optimist Club money. So we've seen findings where the county's giving money to the Red Cross or Salvation Army. We've seen it in cities where they give money to basically booster clubs. Most of the time there's good intention, but the state constitution says if you do that, you've got to have a contract for them to provide a service that you were going to provide anyway. Also, you see /public purpose. You got to use county monies for public purposes, and so every once in a while you'll see them. Maybe it's a good cause, but it's not a public purpose, and so you're going to see those findings in our reports quite often too. Fixed asset issues were basically, the fixed asset records weren't in line. They didn't add things that they bought, didn't take off things that they disposed of. Those kind of things. Shortages where money's missing. It's just where money's gone. They've taken it, maybe they stole it with credit cards. In the last several years we've seen a large county have a $1.1 million fraud over several years. Somebody was taking money from the travel fund. We've seen, not too long ago, we had a county that had over $346,000 in credit card charges for personal uses. Now that was over a period of several years. You know, that kind of thing. Those findings go to the prosecuting attorney. And so, you're gonna see those. Ethics findings. Usually, this is the county doing business with an employee or an official without an ordinance. What this particular code says, 1414-1202, it says that the county's gotta have an ordinance to do business with an official or employee. Really, it's more specific than that. It says it's gotta give the reason why this is good for the county. It's gotta give the extent of that authority. So that's a good code for you to look at, and that's something that's hard, sometimes that's difficult. You know, sometimes it's good for the county to do business with an employee or an official, and when that's the case, you need to pass an ordinance and have that there. So basically, I think what the reason for that is that puts sunshine on it, just like the bid laws, it puts sunshine on transactions that might look funny, and it lets everybody know that it's on the up and up.
Hey, Tim?
Yes, sir.
2 years ago, when we did this, there were some new JPs that were actually, there was one that was already engaged in a business venture with the county. Well, this governs that, and they were gonna have to, before he could become a JP, they were gonna have to figure that out. There are some ways that it can still happen and everything, but that's kind of I mean, in a group this size, there may be somebody that is already currently doing business with the county in some aspect, and that's kind of, you know, what you need to work out in the deal there.
Yeah, well, that's what for years, we've seen that, and that happens a lot of times where a new JP gets in there. Yes, sir.
What about the company you work for?
I have to go back and look at the law. It used to talk about if you had, basically if you benefited from the sale. And so.
Directly or indirectly
Yes.
benefit.
There's the attorney.
The law says that if you directly or indirectly, or an immediate family member of yours directly or indirectly benefits, then it's inappropriate.
Yes, sir.
On your second slide, it mentioned on bids over $20,000, but on paragraph 2 of page 3 of this handout, it says that if it's already in the budget, we as JPs have no say-so over that. So if that $25,000 piece of equipment is in the budget, does it still have to be bid?
If it's a purchase over $20,000, it has to be bid. I mean, you have to appropriate all the expenditures, but that doesn't keep it from having, you're gonna have a lot of things in the budget, probably more than $20,000 of expenditures. You're probably buying new vehicles most years. I mean, most counties probably every year. And so it's gonna have to be bid, or it's gonna have to fall under one of the exceptions. Okay.
Do the JPs get to see that bid, or is it strictly up to the county judge?
Well, I mean, you can ask to see those. Those are opened by the county judge. Now, some of the procedural things,
Yeah, Tim, in that same paragraph, it's underlined, the administration of the appropriation lies with the executive branch. Just of the peace legislative branch, so the administration of that appropriation is the executive branch responsibility, and they would be the ones responsible for proceeding the bid process.
there you go.
If you were gonna buy some new road graders, that would obviously be above the 20,000, but the county judge potentially would have received bids already and know which graders he's wanting to buy before it's put into the budget. And so then when it arrives in the budget, it's already had this process potentially done. The bid process does have to happen at one time or another.
Okay, but so only the county judge looks at those bids?
It would vary on your county judge. Our county judge in our county, he runs a lot of things by us just for informational purposes that really is his decision, but he lets us know. But the bid process, ultimately, the dollars that are spent, we would approve by ordinance, either in the budget or in a separate ordinance. So ultimately, the dollars spent are approved by the quorum court.
Okay, All right, move on. Property and grant issues. Some of the things we've seen where, grant funds are misused, we've seen, where someone, and keep in mind, we back up when I talk about, we're auditors, right? We come in, we're looking at documents, that kind of thing. We're not hiding in the bushes. We're not law enforcement. You know, my phone rings and it's not uncommon for me to get a call and some citizens out there saying, you know, the county judge is working on the personal driveway of his buddy over there. Okay? I mean, maybe, that's not my job, or that's not the job of legislative audit. We're not called to do that. You know, like I said, we don't hide in the bushes, we audit the records. And so, anyway, but we have seen where it's just flat out documented. We could tell that they're using county, vehicles for personal reasons. I mean, you know, and if you put it out there for us to see it, and we know that's wrong, we're gonna write that issue up. And so we see things like that from time to time. All right, restricted funds used improperly. We talked about that. And most of the time, this is gonna go back to road funds, because there's money in the road fund a lot of times. Sometimes this will be something else. If you've got any kind of money that your voters passed in an ordinance that's restricted, that can become an issue as well. But we see that quite often, is that, you know, they'll take those funds and use them for general purposes. And sometimes there's disagreements about what we think it can be used for and what the county can think it can be used for, and anyway. But that's pretty common finding in our audits. We see where bank accounts are uncollateralized. In some ways, that's a good problem. That means you've got some money in the bank. But if you've got more than $250,000 more than the FDIC insurance, you're going to need it to be collateralized. Something that's pretty common if you're tied to the court, you have sheriff and court money. The law says that those monies in the bank, the ending balance has to be identified by the cases, and it's not uncommon to see that finding as well. Errors in financial records, they'll be all from that some officials' journals just are not correct. Sometimes we write up that there's material misstatements in the financial statements. There's been some big error, maybe in recording revenues, expenditures, something like that. We see those kind of findings. Unreconciled bank accounts. That's kind of, we'll see that. Now, some more, these are not findings that were really prevalent this year, but these are things I've seen in the past. This is one you'll be interested in. We've seen it where they paid JPs and they didn't show up for meetings. That particular code there, 1414-1205, it sets the pay for JPs, or gives the parameters, and based upon population, and it says basically you can miss one meeting. And if you miss more than that, you're really not supposed to pay you. And so we've seen where, and that's an interesting thing too. Of course, that's pretty usually it's documented in the minutes whether you're there or not. And so that's kind of easy to see. I already talked about this phishing email scam, $28,000 with the email that was supposedly between the county judge and the treasurer. It really didn't come from the county judge. Talked about the unauthorized credit card purchases, and I did mention that shortage too, a large shortage. As far as our reports, I'll say this and then we'll have questions. Here are some things we have on our website. A lot of audit reports. We've got our upcoming meetings. There is the county financial management system manual, and really you want to take a look at that because that tells you the coding of the county government, what different funds can be used for. That is a very good piece of information. And since you're overseeing the budget, I think you will need to read through that. There is a county tax settlement guide there that it tells you how the property taxes are distributed. So that's a good piece of information. On the AAC website, someone may have already told you this, but there's a whole lot of good information there. There's salary surveys, there's procedure manuals for JPs. purchasing procedural manuals, ethics and conflicts of interest, documents. So that's it's self-serving, I guess. I'd keep arclegaudit.gov on my favorites, and I'd keep arcounties.org as my favorites, because that's where your information is. All right, so we got at least 10 minutes. I'd really like to answer questions. This is enjoyable most of the time, but yeah, if you have questions, I would love to take some. And here's the thing too. I'll just give you my phone number. If you call Legislative Audit, our main number is 501-683-8600. And if you ask to talk to you, they will send you to my phone. And if for some reason I don't answer, you can leave a message. Also, I'll give you my email address. My email address is my name, tim.jones@arclegaudit. That's one word, ARKLEGAUDIT.gov. And so I enjoy talking with officials that do it at the time. Yes, sir.
Say that last part again, please.
ARCLEGAudit.gov, ARKLEGAUDIT.gov.
Thank you.
Questions? Oh.
When you do your exit interviews, with whom do you do those? Who all's involved? Of the county officials?
Okay. When we do our exit interviews, we have to do them with the officials. We'll do all the officials, county judge, county clerk, county treasurer, assessor, collector, sheriff, so on. Now, what we can't do, and we'll have this sometimes, is we have to be aware of the FOI laws. So, anywhere, we don't know, somebody I'm sure gonna talk to you about FOI laws, but if two of you from the same county go fishing, officially you can't talk about county business and all that kind of stuff. And so we have to be careful about who comes to those meetings. So it's pretty much the particular elected official and their the right-hand people, the people who work. Yes, sir.
How often do you do the audits?
We audit every year.
All counties.
Yes, we audit all counties every year. Now, exactly when we get there, depends on a lot of factors. But every year we'll be audited. Yes, sir.
I heard you say to this gentleman's question over here that that was a executive decision on the bidding, seeing the bids that were made on equipment. Can the if enough people want to see those bids, can you make a motion? I know you hadn't got into some of these procedural stuff and all that other. Can you present a motion and request to see them?
Okay. Well, I am gonna be careful about answering those procedural things because that is not my expertise. But what I can say is that most of the time, I think they would let you see them because that should be subject to FOI.
Okay.
Generally, you can just ask the county judge and you'll be able to see them. Because like Tim said, it is all public record.
Yes, sir.
On the Schedule 4, why is the most recent year on the left? It would seem like going through time, it would make more sense to read left to right.
Well, if you'll, pretty much everything we do, we reference the most current year first. That's kind of a consistency thing. We could have done it the other way, but that's if you'll read any of our findings, it's going to be.
But that's the way you do it.
Yeah, that's right.
It just, okay. Most everything I've ever seen, it goes through time.
Right.
Right.
And here's one of the things we try to do. In one of my jobs, there's 75 counties, and we have 9 supervisors who supervise audits all over the place. And so what we try to do is we try to be consistent with judgment, everything from how a report's done to our judgment on how we write up the finding. And that's not always easy, but we try to do that. We give it a good try. So anyway.
The lease, you talk about purchase over $20,000. What if a lease agreement is over $20,000? You have to bid it out, the lease agreements?
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I know you talked about the audit book that will be coming out in 2018, but is that available for the? Okay, I know you were talking about the audit book that you're gonna mail out pretty soon. With the JPs that are coming in and new elected, will that be available for us just to look over it, or do we need to go to the county judge and ask them about it?
Yeah, our audits are public information. So you can see any county audit since 1999 on our website. So now, I will tell you, 2018, you won't be seeing, probably the earliest you'd see any 2018 county audit would be sometime in the summer. And there's still some 17s to come out. But yes, that's gonna go, now here's the thing, if your county audit is released in January, there could be a chance that you might not receive it, because we're gonna have the information we had on our mailing list is gonna be the old court who was on that. So what you can do always is you can go to our website, and if you just don't do it, we have made copies of audits and mailed them to anybody, to a private citizen, to elected officials. So that information is absolutely public. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir?
If a wrongdoing is found in your audit, how's it corrected? I mean, you mentioned one up there, and I'm not gonna bring it out, but it had been going on for years. How's it, and it was finally stopped, but how's it corrected? I mean, how do we protect the?
Okay, that's a good question. Who we are is we're a reporting entity. That means we tell you what we find. We have no power to make somebody change something. We can write our reports in certain ways, obviously, but that's not our job. Now, if it goes to the law says if money's missing or it's an ethics violation, it says we have to send those findings to the local prosecuting attorney, and we do so. And so the prosecuting attorney will make a decision whether he thinks that's something to chase or not. There's a whole lot of factors for the prosecutor to decide on that. The other thing, sometimes it just comes down to someone besides us has to take some kind of action. You have the authority as a legislative body of the county to do what you can do. Voters have their part in it. I mean, I remember being on the phone with one citizen and complaining about things left and right, and what it came down to was there wasn't, it was something that he didn't like what this particular official was doing. That wasn't something anybody could do anything about but the voters. Because that official had that authority to do what he was doing. And so, anyway, I didn't mean to ramble on that, but we're just a reporting entity.
Tim, maybe talk about the process of y'all presenting the audit to the legislature and maybe the official coming in and responding to audit findings.
Okay, this is the way it works. If you're an official, so you're a county judge and you have the same finding 2 audits in a row, the Legislative Joint Audit Committee invites you to their meeting, and you sit out in the standing committee, you sit at the end of the table, and they ask you what you're going to do to correct that issue. I said, that does happen. So they do come and answer to the committee, and that is some pressure. There's no question about that. Most people don't like coming to the state capitol. They don't like sitting down there at the end and answering to a bunch of legislators, questions about their records or whatever the issue not being correct. And sometimes, they don't like how we wrote the finding, or they complain about us, but that is, thanks for bringing that up. That is something that happens that is a deterrent, I guess you would say.
One more thing on bidding.
Here you go.
Are you allowed to, there's NJPA, are you allowed to just go straight to an NJPA vendor to purchase a piece of equipment without doing the bidding process?
There in the code, there's one of the exemptions for organizations tied to, I think it's the National Association of Counties, and so there's some of those organizations, yes, you can go to and you can buy something through them. It's just like there are some vehicles on state contract,
Right.
that you can go straight to whoever won that state contract and buy that vehicle. And then there's a few exceptions to that too, that allows you to use your local vendor if they're within a certain amount. And there's some details there as well. So in the county government, there's some exceptions to the bidding. There's certain items that are exceptions. In the city, which I look at, and they have some options of waiving bids. And so that was an interesting conversation one time I had with a city council member. He was mad at the city, but he had voted to waive, that they bought something, but he voted to waive the bids. He kind of been misled. I'm like, you took it out of my hands when you waived the bids. And so, that's what I would encourage you to do, is court members, think about what you're doing, as those things come before you.
Thank you, Tim. We appreciate you coming out today. So, my name is Lindsay Bailey. I'm the general legal counsel here at the Association of Arkansas Counties. And I will answer your general questions, procedural questions, things about Robert's rules, things about what can you do, what can a county judge do, general legal questions.
I'm Josh Curtis, Director of Governmental Affairs here. I'm also a JP in Saline County, so I should have a little bit of street cred with this bunch. But we have a good quorum court in Saline County. I think I see a couple new members here today. Thank y'all for coming. Thank y'all for being out in the weather. And we thought we'd have a lesser amount of crowd here because of the weather, but we appreciate y'all coming. I'm going to talk a little bit about meetings and how we do things procedurally in Saline County. Later on, we'll talk about budgets. This next lady I'll introduce is Brandy McAllister. She works here at the AAC, and I'll let her introduce herself.
I'm gonna stand. I'm real short, so I know you in the back can't see me when I'm sitting down. These two are much more helpful when it comes to probably 90% of the questions you guys are ever gonna have. I work on the risk management side. What that means is if you're in the risk management fund with the association and we do your general liability or your auto, that I'm the general counsel here for that. I help keep counties out of litigation. I answer a lot of employment questions. The one major thing I work with JPs on throughout the year is employment policies. We do have a model policy that we've crafted with the help of many attorneys and a lot of years of experience. And so we do have that. If you get into your county and you see you guys have an out-of-date employment policy or you just have questions about it, that's one of the things you can contact me about. And if you're not sure who to call, you just call one of us, and we can bounce the ball to the person who really handles that specific type of question.
The first thing I want to talk about is the Freedom of Information Act. If you didn't get one, there are these little blue handbooks in the back. These are put out every 2 years by the Attorney General's office. These are very helpful tools. Of course, the FOI deals with two different things, public records and public meetings. Pretty much all you all need to know about public records is any record that is kept in a county office or that is kept with the quorum court minutes or other documents. It is public record that is disclosable to any member, any citizen of Arkansas or business doing business in the state of Arkansas. Unless it's exempt, and there are several reasons a document can be exempt, but I won't really get into those. What you would be more interested in are the public meeting requirements. And there are court cases that say where 2 or more JPs are gathered in the county's name doing county business, that is a meeting that is under the FOI. So if you and your buddy are out fishing, like David mentioned earlier, that's absolutely fine. If you're both JPs, you're allowed to do that. Or you and the county judge are allowed to do that. What you're not allowed to do is discuss county business while you're there. So it's how it is. It's not workable. It's not fun. It's not always easy to do, but that is the law. And we'll also remind you before you ask any questions that we are being recorded today. Anyone have questions?
Concerning who people feel
business, would that extend to emails, social media, telephone calls?
Yes, his question was concerning the public meeting, does that extend to emails, personal phone calls, things like that? It does. What the law says, and I believe that's specifically addressed in this handbook, is a meeting is a regular or special meeting, formal or informal. The courts have said what is not a meeting is a county judge sending to a JP maybe a memo, giving information, purely informational. Where it becomes a meeting is when you start correlating back and forth, or if polling is going on, asking you how you would vote on an issue, or trying to persuade you how to vote on an issue. When the communication starts becoming reciprocal back and forth, that's where you start getting into the weeds in a meeting.
Our personal notes during a meeting, a quote-unquote meeting that we're taking, are those subject to FOIA laws or anything if it's just our personal notes, scribble, those type of things?
Absolutely. If you keep them.
Would you mind taking just a few seconds to address the people's access to your personal phones, if you use them in business for the purposes of county business, and emails? You said emails already. If you starting a conversation, maybe expand on that a little bit more.
Yes, sir. Emails are considered public records. Texts can be considered public records. It does not matter if it's on your personal phone or your county phone. This is true for JPs and all county elected officials and employees. What determines whether or not it's a public record is the content of the record. So if you have a county email and then a personal Gmail account, if you are emailing in your personal Gmail account or texting from your personal phone, but it is about county business, it is subject to the FOI. And vice versa, if you're using a county email and you're emailing your wife the grocery list, that would not be considered a public record that's subject to FOI. It will all depend on the content and whether or not it is county business related. Yes.
Does that mean that our phones and emails will be subject to, does that mean that our phones will be subject to people going through them, or?
No. No.
Okay.
No, what it means is if you are requested, then you are under an obligation to provide them what they ask for.
Okay, so individuals can ask for information that's held in your mobile device or on your email?
Yeah, they can ask you for all emails that you've sent to other JPs or county judges or elected officials that have to do with county business, and you would have to provide that to them.
Thank you.
Yes.
I haven't read this, but we have to provide that it's reasonable and necessary and given the routine course of business.
So what the law says is any record that is required to be kept by law or is otherwise kept. It does not have to be reasonable, it does not have to be necessary. It says that the request should be sufficiently specific that you can find it with reasonable efforts. So, no, in fact, many FOI requests are not reasonable or necessary at all. And it's petty or political or personal, and you still just have to respond.
At this point, before we're actually in office, if I was to go to a current JP to get up to date on something, is that considered not something I should be doing at this point in time?
All meetings of the quorum court and committee meetings are open to the public. As a member of the public, you have the right to attend any of those meetings.
No, I'm saying if I was to go to a current JP and say, I know this issue's happening right now, and can you bring me up to date, like, over coffee or something? I'm not sworn in yet. Am I currently under?
Not until you take the oath of office.
Okay, so that kind of thing, I could go talk to the county judge one-on-one and not have that be considered any violation?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
If we're at the quorum court meeting now and hadn't been called to order, could him and I talk about business, or we gotta wait till the meeting's been called to order?
You should wait until the meeting has been called to order and doing it properly there in front of the press and the public. Yes, sir.
In my situation, I'm newly elected, Lord will be sworn in January. I have an office, and I rent part of my office to a currently elected JP. So there's gonna be 2 JPs in the same county in my building. Should I, for risk reduction, just so the public doesn't say anything? You big deal?
I think that's a personal decision that you'll have to make. If you're in different offices, but they're in the same building, I don't necessarily think that's gonna be.
They have one entry door, but they are separated.
It's for you, it's gonna be a matter of public perception, and you being able to show that you're not doing county business. You may just wanna play that by ear and see how that goes. But there's not anything in the law that says that you can't have offices in the same building. There's nothing that says that you can't have lunch together and talk about your kids, grandkids, what you did that weekend. You just can't talk about county business. Yes.
So this is a little off topic of everything else, but I was kind of wondering about the responsibilities as a JP. And are my responsibilities to my district and who voted me in, or are my responsibilities to the county as a whole?
That's a good segue for me to hand it off to Josh. As a JP, he can probably talk about that a little better.
The answer to your question is yes. I think the way I hear it talked about up at the Capitol is representatives in committees, they're looking out for the state-wide approach in voting in committees, because it's only a certain number of elected officials, only a certain number of state representatives in a committee. But then when you go to the full body, the 100-member body of the state legislature, that's when you vote for your district. Now that's just kind of an unwritten rule up there. But the answer to your question is yes. You represent your district first and foremost, because those are the voters that you're representing on the quorum court. But also you have to look at the whole county when you're making your votes and making policy. I'm going to go into the procedural manual. You should have got this at the back. And I'm going to talk a little bit about your quorum court meetings. Obviously, quorum courts are comprised of justice of the peace, and for smaller counties, there's 9 JPs on those quorum courts. It goes up from there to 11 to 13, and there's 3 counties in the state, Benton, Washington, and Pulaski, with 15 quorum court members. I'm going to direct you to page 32 of the procedural manual. That kind of talks about how quorum courts should operate, how they go about doing business, doing the county's business. First and foremost, the law says that you should organize in your first regular scheduled meeting of your term. So that's in January, you should have a regular scheduled meeting, and that's when you organize, that's when you pass your procedural manual or your procedural ordinance. In Saline County, I'm going to talk a lot of specifics about Saline County just because that's the county I'm most familiar about. Now, things are done a lot different from county to county. The law is pretty broad when it comes to county quorum courts on how their policies are developed and how their procedures can be handled. I'm going to talk first about regular meetings. I recommend that you set a regular meeting each month. Is that any better? Maybe? We got some feedback.
I can hear you.
I know, but we got some feedback up here or something. There we go. I think that's better. Yeah. So one of the most important things you will do is pass a procedural ordinance. In Saline County, we have got a procedural ordinance. We make modifications to it from time to time. The one thing that's really important in the procedural ordinance is how do you get things on the agenda? How does your county provide you a way to get things on the agenda? I'll tell you how it can be set up. It can be set up as, obviously, as a JP, you can put things on the agenda. You can call your judge, who a lot of times they're the ones that develop the agenda and produce the agenda. When you're a quorum court, you do not have the ability to hire and fire employees. So you cannot have necessarily a personal secretary for your quorum court. The secretary of the quorum court is designated by law as the county clerk. That position keeps all the minutes and the records of quorum court meetings. Sometimes counties go through the county clerk to get things on the agenda. So I'd recommend knowing how you are allowed to put things on the agenda. Obviously, with quorum court meetings, you can make a motion during meetings and add something to the agenda. A lot of times that requires a 2/3 vote to suspend any kind of rules out there. And I'll get into the motions and the amount of votes that it takes to pass motions. I would highly recommend that y'all go through the procedural manual and learn that, understand the process of the best way to handle different things on your quorum court meetings. I'll direct you now to page 41. That's kind of the rules of governing motions, things like that. You can see there, motion to adjourn is non-debatable and it requires a majority vote. You go down, limit debate, takes a 2/3 majority. This is a good cheat sheet of what you can do and how motions are handled. The county judge is the presiding officer of the quorum court. They do not have a vote, however, they do have the ability to veto ordinances. There's a process for that. There's a process for overriding the vetoes. It must be done at the next quorum court meeting after the veto occurs. That takes a 3/5 majority. Another thing in process in your meetings, this has came up recently. Lindsay talked about FOIs, things like that, and the media watches closely on certain counties that may have a little contention in their proceedings. However, one thing that we will talk about is public comment. The law specifically states that you must allow public comment before a final vote is taken by the quorum court. Now, the way we do things in Saline County, we have a committee meeting and then a quorum court meeting. We allow for public comment after each one of those meetings. So if we discuss something in a committee meeting, that there's public comment after that committee meeting. And then we'll allow public comment after the quorum court meeting. So before a final action is taken on an agenda item, you must allow public comment. Any questions? This is just a discussion, Q&A type presentation. So if there's any questions, just raise your hand and I'll answer those questions. And if I can't, I'll let one of these ladies up here answer it.
What about committees, Josh? Is there anything you want to say on that?
Yeah, committees. So committees, there's not a whole lot of direction in Arkansas law when it comes to committees. Quorum courts, obviously, you have to have one meeting per month. Committees is very broad and open. So in your procedural ordinance, that's when I suggest that you outline those committees. In Saline County, we have 3 standing committees. So we have a finance committee, public works and safety committee, and an HR committee. Anything that gets on the quorum court agenda has to be passed by one of those committees, unless you do the 2/3 majority and select an add-on to the agenda. Quorum courts can make committees. They can say, we want X, Y, and Z committee. They can say, I want a dinosaur committee or whatever you may want, and you say, we want 7 members on that committee. However, the responsibility to fulfill that committee is the county judge. The county judge appoints members to committees. That's one thing that is stated in the law. The county judge can select a chair, or that committee can select a chair. So it's very important to have a procedural manual that you're very familiar with and that you know what's going on. But I'll say this on committees, we have in Saline County our finance committee, and the whole quorum court is a member of the finance committee. It's a standing committee. There's also, I've heard in other counties where there's a committee of the whole. It's a little different from the committee process. The committee of the whole is the whole quorum court, but the county judge is the presiding officer of the committee of the whole. Committees, the county judge cannot be the chair of a regular committee. Yes, sir.
Does the chairman of a committee have a vote in that committee or not?
Only, now I said the county judge does not have a vote on the quorum court, but the chairman can break ties if there's ties in a committee. Is that correct?
Not the county judge.
Not the county judge, but a chairman, if there's a committee, the JP that's presiding over that committee can break a tie. Yes, sir.
I'm kind of,
Where, Matt?
right here.
Yes, sir.
I'm kind of confused on something, and maybe you can help me out, or maybe the attorney can help me out. Why does the county judge appoint JPs as elected to these committees? I'm kind of confused on that. I heard about it, I know about it a little bit, but I'm really confused why would we pass a law to have a county judge who's an elected official appoint other elected officials to oversee the governance of the county to committees?
That's by state law. State law says that the county judge appoints committees. If quorum courts don't have to have committees. There's quorum courts out there that do not have committees, and it's just one quorum court meeting a month. Yes, sir.
What I've read recently is if the chairman is a voting member, he can vote anytime it makes a difference. So he can either break a tie or create a tie, the way I read Robert's Rule of Order. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Is that a yes?
Yes, sir.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, sounds good.
David?
Dave behind you.
You're equally elected, you don't forfeit your vote in most situations like that.
I thought I read the newest Roberts that the chairman could vote any time. Is that not true? I thought that, yeah, I thought he could vote.
I guess my perception is the chairman's only gonna vote if there is a tie. I guess you could do it like that if you could create a tie, I guess.
Well, and where some of the confusion, municipalities, the mayor definitely does not vote unless to break a tie. So that could be, we have a little bit of familiarity with municipalities and with counties. Years ago, I was on the school board, and I was president of the school board. Well, it was viewed that the president didn't vote except in a tie. Well, I viewed it that I was equally elected. All of the JPs are as equally elected, and I don't think you forfeit your vote at any point. Now, the county judge, that he's not in that capacity, so, that's how we do it.
I've heard you talk about ordinances and motions, and are they both developed the same way? They're presented either at the meeting, or I guess can you put it on the agenda, and if so, does that have to be in writing?
And that's what I was talking about, process. So if you have an ordinance that you would like to present to the quorum court, your county has a process on getting things on the agenda. Generally, you'd give it to the county judge or the staff member of the county judge, or the county clerk's office, who may develop the agenda. You, by being a JP, you were allowed to put things on the agenda. Then the order of business is laid out by procedure. Normally, it's a prayer and a pledge, and then old business, new business reports. Then you get into discussion of any kind of new business, and then that's when you would present your ordinance. And then to present your ordinance, you need a motion, a second, and then you can debate the ordinance, and then at the appropriate time, have a vote on that ordinance.
And the ordinance is gonna affect all counties. Motions mainly are gonna affect the procedures of the meeting. Is that?
Well, ordinance is county law, and you have to have a motion, to pass an ordinance. You have to, I
hear you interchanging it.
no, so a motion is to perform an act. So you're acting on the ordinance before you, and you're gonna make a motion to approve that ordinance, and then you'd have to have a second, and then you could debate the ordinance, and then you would have the vote on the motion, which the motion is to approve the ordinance.
So there's no debate on the ordinance.
Yes, that's, you get a motion in a second, and then you have discussion.
One other thing I would like to point out, the only document or record of a quorum court that is binding authority is an ordinance. A resolution is a general statement of policy, but it has no binding authority. The same with a motion. If someone were to make a motion in a quorum court meeting and it gets a second and you vote on it and you say, we would like to take some action on this motion, it's not binding. You have to have it in the form of an ordinance for it to be binding.
So even if it got presented, passed, the judge could say,
If it's a resolution.
if it's a resolution or a motion.
Correct. The only county law that is binding on any action, and the only one that allows you to take any action is by ordinance.
And there is a motion and a second on any issue, whether it's a resolution or whether it's an ordinance or whatever it is. If you want to bring something, I mean, you can discuss things, but if you want to, like Josh says, take an action, you have to make a motion, and some motions, I've had a motion to die right in a second. So, you know, that's as far as that goes. So, but if you get a motion and a second, then if you've not already discussed it, then you discuss it. And the actual procedure, we do this twice in a quorum court meeting. If y'all have watched, your own quorum court, you'll make a motion and a second to read it. And then, after you read it, potentially you'll have some discussion. Then you'll have a motion and a second to potentially adopt it. So there's really kind of two sets of deals as you go through. Correct me if I'm wrong, Josh.
Yeah, I think you only need one motion on a ordinance. You make a motion, you read it, obviously the motion needs a second, then you debate it, have discussion, and then you vote on that motion. And you're talking about the county judge. The county judge can either veto a ordinance or sign an ordinance.
But if it's a motion, it don't even have to do nothing.
What are you gonna make a motion for?
I don't know.
Yeah, so you're not gonna make a motion unless you're taking action on something.
Yeah. Any JP can make a motion at any juncture in any meeting. If you've got a motion, hey, I think it's time to adjourn. You can make that motion or whatever it is. So the motion itself is not putting anything into law.
Right, that, I hear you interchanging the terms, that's why.
On motion and ordinance?
Yeah.
Okay, it will always take a motion to do ordinance because it is, like you said, an action.
Well, could it be presented, on the agenda?
Well, you still have to make a motion to make it happen. Just by the merits of it being on the agenda, we still gotta run through and do everything, to make it happen.
Can the county judge's veto be overridden?
Yes, it takes a 3/5 vote at the next meeting after the veto. Yes, sir.
Explain back on page 5, the quorum court may exercise the following powers. Explain C and H. Say the question again.
Say the question.
On page 5, the quorum court may exercise the following powers, but are not limited to, and there's a list. Could you explain C and H? The rest of them I understand fully.
Are you in the procedural manual?
Yes. Page 5. Page 5, the bottom right-hand paragraph.
Last paragraph.
So H is to fill vacancies in elected county offices.
Yes.
So So what that refers to is, say there's, in the middle of the term, the assessor resigns. The quorum court is responsible to fill that vacancy.
And C.
So a county quorum court can make law that is not contrary to state law or federal law. A quorum court, and this is what it refers to, can designate certain activities unlawful if it's not inconsistent with state law. It's pretty rare. And it can carry a misdemeanor penalty for that. It can't be a felony. I'm trying to think of some that you may have on your books. Do you know of any, Brandy?
Where the quorum court makes something a misdemeanor. Sometimes, an example, and I'll actually kind of use this as a segue, so let me introduce something before I answer that question. But in addition to what I already mentioned, how I work with counties for personnel policies and recommendations on that, another big piece of what I do that'll be important to you guys as JPs is, now this is again for risk management fund counties, so if you're with a PERMA, I do not do this on your behalf, but for all the RMF counties, I do the codification program. And so what that means is that we literally, have typed your ordinances, we publish them in a book that we provide, so each of you, when you swear in or before, but at least afterwards, should be provided a dark green book as a JP, and it has all of your code in there. Now, we don't codify appropriations, special ordinances, we just codify what's considered to be the permanent county law. But through that project, I have read thousands and thousands of ordinances over the past 8 years, which is why Lindsay looked at me and asked some of the things that we see. Chapter 3 in that codification book has the county law in there, and the very last section in there is where I put these types of ordinances if the county has passed them. Examples, and I can't speak to if it conflicts state law. I'll tell you this, I don't go and double check what you've done. I can just tell you what I've seen. There are ordinances for having to, if you've got a property that's got a lot of, maybe kind of turned into its own little junkyard, that requires fencing to be put on those, and I've seen a misdemeanor applied to that. Counties who have levies, I've seen ordinances passed that make it a misdemeanor to go ripping around on the levee with your four-wheeler. Again, if any of that conflicts with state law, I make no representation as to if there is state law on that or not. Just those are examples of what I see as far as what counties pass. Littering ordinances, there's state law on that though, so I'm not sure if that stuff runs concurrent with state law or not. A lot of times I see counties passing ordinances that really just restate the state law and don't do anything new, but just kind of go through the process of restating it. I do question that. If you guys find yourself with an ordinance like that, I will question that from a legal standpoint. Why that kind of gives me pause is because if you're restating the state law and publishing it in your code, first question is why? It's already the law, and maybe it's just noticed. Maybe you just want to make sure everybody knows it. Well, that's fine. Instead of rewriting it, I would just always recommend having your ordinance refer back to the state law, because I promise once you pass it, you're not going to be thinking about it every time we have a legislative session up here. And when that law gets amended, if you had the verbiage in your ordinance, you laid out every single section, and then we change something at, the legislature at the state level, you either are going to have to remember and you're going to have to go back and amend that ordinance, or now you've got an ordinance that's in conflict. So, if you guys find that type of ordinance coming across and you've got to vote on that, maybe just go back and refer to specific code sections. I see that a lot too with federal law. When the county adopts, and I'll kind of jump back to the personnel policy there, most personnel policies are going to refer to a lot of federal law. Americans with Disabilities Act, that's the ADA. Family Medical Leave Act, that's FMLA. Overtime laws, that's FLSA, Fair Labor Standards Act. So there's a lot of federal law that gets referenced in your county personnel policies. Again, a good way to handle that is to, if you're going to articulate what those laws require, always go back and just refer to, as that law amends, the county policy will update. And that way you don't have to ever worry about falling, out of compliance with it. I mean, the good news is you don't change the federal law. If you fall out of compliance with it, the federal law still trumps, but it just keeps your ordinances nicer and cleaner and makes sure that, you don't have to go back and have kind of these cleanup parties later on when you find a bunch of stuff out of compliance. You guys have questions on that so far? Okay. Another thing I want to touch on codification. I do not discriminate against a PERMA or RMF counties, so you are all welcome to call me whether you're in our risk management pool or not, but again, I only codify for risk management fund. Things that you would call me for that are related to codification are if you guys want a sample ordinance, like Lindsay's asking me, we get questions like that all the time. Hey, I want to pass a vicious dog ordinance, or, I can't think of, I guess, what everybody already has. I mean, your Robert's Rules of Order, we've got those ordinances on the books. You want to pass your levy ordinance, or it's something really obscure and you just want to see if we have an ordinance on it. We have 56 counties as of 2019 in our pool. So again, I've got a huge number of ordinances to go back and be able to search. And so I can send those over to you, can show you the original ordinance, which county passed it. Again, I don't always have the ability to speak on, what that county was thinking when they passed it. I mean, they didn't call me, I didn't draft it for them, but I'm more than happy to just provide the information and then talk you through it. There's a couple of counties last week that I was working with, and I sent them a sample ordinance. They said, okay, well, we need to change this up a little bit. This is what we're trying to do. Most of y'all probably have a county attorney. Probably for the most part, those are part-time, and so I don't know how involved they get on, sorry, I've got lots of. Is the feedback bad for you guys, or is it just up here? Bad for everyone? Okay. Well, I'm just gonna yell at you then, so that way we don't have to listen to the feedback. Can you guys hear me okay in the back of the room? Mike, can you hear me? Yeah. Okay, that's the test there. Now I lost my train of thought. What was I telling you? About the law. Okay. Okay, yes, thank you. I was like, wait, was anyone paying attention? Does anyone know what I was talking about? Okay, good. Yes, about the county attorney. So the only reason I bring them up is because, however involved they are, I never want to cut them out of the loop, right? I like to tell people it's called a legal opinion because they have been known to differ a time or two, right? So I'm more than happy to give you my thoughts, but if you have a county attorney who's very hands-on and likes to be involved in the ordinance drafting, by all means, defer that to them, and you can check with me and see what my thoughts are or what we have on the books, and I'm happy to provide it. But if you don't have somebody to ask, whether you're RMF or PERMA, again, we're happy to kind of walk you through some of those to the extent that we've got those ordinances to pass. Yes, ma'am?
I don't know what RMF and PERMA mean.
Okay, so RMF is the Risk Management Fund, and I talked a little bit about that at the intro, but so everyone knows, the AAC, all 75 counties in the state are members of the Association of Arkansas Counties. So under the Association of Counties, there's the Risk Management Fund, and that's where I've mentioned for the counties that we have in our pool, we do your general liability, your auto, we do work comp for everybody in the state, we do property insurance, and so if you're with us, if you're with Risk Management Fund, and you can find that out by asking the county judge or the county clerk, or looking at the budget. So if you're with us, then we handle those types of coverages for you, and if you're not with us, you're with a PERMA. Okay, there's only two companies, two organizations in the state who provide that type of coverage for counties. And so Risk Management Fund, again, where we really come into play as far as the fund itself goes is if county officials get sued, we do the civil rights, constitutional protection, we deal with the county sheriffs and the jails a lot. Just by the nature of what they do, they're subject to a lot of lawsuits, employment lawsuits. We handle that regardless of the official. So really any constitutional violation, auto defense, one of the county officials driving a vehicle gets into an auto accident, we handle either the payment of that claim or the defense of it. Does that make sense? Okay. And so, again, if you're RMF, really the only distinction for codification means I actually have your ordinances, you know, and I can look up ordinances from those types of counties. But if you're a county that's not part of the fund, then a PERMA does your codification, or maybe some other third-party group does it. And so they would be the ones to kind of check with for what you already have on the books. But like I said, we'll share it with any county regardless of who you're with. So if, you know, you may be with Baxter County, but you call up and you say, well, do you have an ordinance on this? I mean, I can go search a pool, not just the Baxter County ordinances, but I can go search all of our ordinances and then find something that may be useful. Another kind of cool thing about our codification program is that we have this stuff posted online. Now, not all counties are up online yet because we're still working on the process of getting all of those up and running, but if you have access to, again, the Risk Management Fund on our website, there's a place to log in with credentials, and so there's an online searchable version, and that wouldn't just access your county, it actually accesses all of our counties. So anyone that we've codified and published will be available online, so you guys can do some, you know, self-searching and kind of look in to see what other counties have passed. You guys have any questions on that? Okay. I think that's pretty much all I've got.
Any questions over anything we've discussed?
In going to the meetings of our quorum court, I've noticed that they use the declare emergency quite frequently. I was wondering what qualifies as an emergency, and do most counties do that with everything that they do?
So what he's referring to is emergency ordinances. There's really no parameters for what determines an emergency ordinance. I will say in Saline County, we use emergency ordinances, and that requires a 2/3 vote for emergency ordinances. It's the same thing as the appropriation ordinances. Appropriation ordinance require a 2/3 vote. The reason they do appropriation or do emergency ordinances is to get something passed on one night, rather than 3 separate readings. So the way a regular ordinance is supposed to be passed is you have the first reading on one quorum court night, which is, say, January, first reading. You do not have to vote on it, you just have to read it. The second reading would come on February quorum court meeting, and then the third reading would then require the final vote and passage of that ordinance. So regular ordinances do not require, all they require is a majority. So I would say appropriation ordinances and emergency ordinances, they require a 2/3 vote. So it's a little bit higher of a threshold when you do those appropriation ordinances and those emergency ordinances.
When I first came on the quorum court, everything had an emergency clause in it. Well, everything is not an emergency. Air conditioner breaks down when it's 107 outside, that would be maybe a legitimate, if you're funding a line item that doesn't have enough money to buy an air conditioner, well, that could, I mean, it's not an emergency, but it would qualify as one, but not near everything is an emergency. You've got 30 days to pay most of your bills anyway, unless they've not gotten the bill to you in time. So I think clearly it can be said that emergency clauses are potentially used more than they should be.
Yeah, but in contrast to that, David, a regular ordinance, you can also suspend the rules and have all 3 readings in one night, which is the same threshold in passing an emergency ordinances, because it requires 2/3 vote to suspend the rules. Yes, sir.
You said that the ordinance has to be read 3 times in 3 different meetings. Is that a Saline County procedure, or is that?
No, that's by state law. 3 different readings. Yes, sir.
Can the second and third reading be at the same meeting?
Yes, if you suspend the rules, yes, sir. And you can also suspend the rules and read by title only as well. Yes, sir.
Speaking of emergency ordinances, is there ever a situation that would call for an emergency meeting by the quorum court? Is there such thing as that?
Yes, and it's kind of either an emergency meeting or a special meeting. That's laid out in Arkansas Code 1414-904, the county judge or a majority of the elected justices may call a special meeting of the quorum court upon at least 24 hours notice by telephone, fax, or email.
What would a situation, like an example, be of something that would call for that?
Maybe there truly is an emergency and the county needs an appropriation next day or something to that effect.
A disaster or something other maybe.
Possibly a disaster, or even maybe filling a vacancy. Say that there's a vacancy of the sheriff retiring or resigning, and hey, he's going to resign on November 3rd, so you need to have a meeting pretty quick to fill that vacancy.
Now, on that note on the vacancies, we replace county elected officials from the quorum court, but the governor replaces a JP who resigns or retires or something other in mid-term. So there's a difference.
We're going to have one more question and go to break. Yes, sir.
I don't know how to ask this, but how can the majority of the quorum court members ask for a meeting if they can't talk to one another about county business?
The structure of the AAQC, I'm the president. Now, the way we arrive at that is each of the 4 congressional districts, since we are legislative, we are based on the legislative districts, the 4 districts in Arkansas. And at our April meeting, we get together and each legislative district goes to the 4 corners where appropriate. You know, it works real simple for us. We got 4 corners in the room and we got 4 districts, and it usually works out well. But the 4 districts, then they go in and they elect within their district 3 representatives from that district. And then when all 4 districts elect their 3, that makes up what we call a 12-member board for the Quorum Court Association. The Quorum Court Association. I used to be able to talk, but anyway, that gets our 12-member board. And then after we have the 12 members from across the state, then we hold elections on that board, and we have president, vice president, secretary, and then there is a representative to the AAC board, and also a couple of representatives to the legislative committee that AAC has as well. And I say all that because we want folks to get involved. One step back, in order to come to the April meeting, you may or may not know, your quorum court elects a representative from your quorum court. Should have started with that. But one representative from all 75 quorum courts is elected, and then they come to the April meeting, and then that's where we go into the legislative districts and get the 12-member board from that. So if y'all are interested in that, jockey for the position, you know, I mean, in your county, you may have somebody that is a representative, maybe doesn't come to the meetings, or is not as interested anymore, or something like that. And if y'all are, why, you know, that's up to you, but you can certainly lobby for that position in your county if you would so desire. But anyway, that's the flow of how we build our organization from the grassroots up. So, any questions on that? Yes?
Well, then what are your responsibilities, or what does that actually mean once you're on that?
Well, when you get elected as your representative, I mean, you're a representative from your district, and then when you get elected as a representative from your county, well, that's just a further representation. I look at it as a little bit more representation that Boone County gets in Little Rock than they would if I wasn't here. But the responsibilities, we have a meeting in April and we have a meeting in August, and those are the meetings that the representatives come to. Anybody's always invited, whether you're the representative or not. But the voting rights would lay with that representative. But as far as responsibilities, it's just come and learn. basically, because we put on an April meeting and an August meeting that everything we do is aimed at educating all of us a little bit better, for a little bit better understanding of the job that we do. Now, as you go on up, well, there's maybe a few more responsibilities, you know, as we go on up. The secretary, of course, of the board, she keeps minutes. The vice president, you know, fills in if the president's not there. I'm the president, so I try to, in my tenure, I've tried to be a common denominator for our organization, tried to attend everything that they'll let me. And so that, you know, we, as a Quorum Court Association, had a little bit more visibility. Folks know that we are here, and it's kind of like that SEC commercial a few years ago. You gotta let them know you're here, you know. So, you know, anyway, but as far as responsibilities, while we're just, you know, the main responsibility is just learn all we can and do as good as we can.
Maybe to elaborate a little bit on what David said, is one of the responsibilities is legislation. They talk about what kind of policies and legislation that the Quorum Court Association might want, and they might draft a bill and try to run it at the Capitol. That's one thing that we at the Association of Arkansas Counties, Lindsay and I represent multiple groups of elected officials, and they bring legislative ideas to us. We draft those ideas and we vote on those bills, those draft bills, and present those up to the Capitol and try to pass new laws up there that would benefit counties across the state. Yes, sir.
Does the AAC have a lobbyist or?
Yes, both Lindsay and myself are registered lobbyists. Mark Whitmore is a registered lobbyist. Chris Lyons, our executive director, is a legislative lobbyist, and maybe Christy is too, as well. But we're kind of the policy team, and we, in fact, this week, this Thursday, the Association of Arkansas Counties has its legislative package, and we're going to present that package to the City County Local Committee, Joint Committee up here at the Capitol this Thursday. I think we have, about 30-something bills in that legislative package that we're going to be presenting. All right, I'm going to switch gears. I know on your agenda, it says Mr. Eddie Jones is going to be doing budgeting. He was unable to make it today, so I'm going to take over a little bit of his portion of the agenda. I'm sorry I'm not as a pro on budgeting as Eddie Jones is. Eddie Jones was a previous county treasurer. He was a previous comptroller. He was the previous director of the Association of Arkansas Counties. So he's forgotten a lot more than Lindsay and I know right now. So, but Eddie prepared this great budgeting book for you guys, that you got in the back, called Revenue Projecting and County Budgeting. So, quorum courts are the holders of the purse strings. That's your primary focus on the quorum court. That's your primary focus of your legislative body. However, I wouldn't go into a meeting shouting at each elected official saying, "We hold the purse strings, we hold the purse strings." I think it's a better, it's kind of like what attracts more honey or vinegar. So, my advice to quorum courts across the state is to get along with your county elected officials as much as possible. Always be professional. Talk with them throughout the year. You cannot manage their office. They cannot manage what you do on the quorum court. The cooperation in developing budgets is key. And I also tell quorum court members, during the budgeting process, that's probably when the elected officials are going to be talking to you the most, is because they're asking for more money and they're articulating why they need these funds for their offices. So if you work well with them during the budget process, I have found that they work well with you throughout the year. If you need any information, if you have a constituent that has a problem, you could have that relationship already with said office, and you can go talk to those elected officials and maybe affect change with your constituents and help them out. That's kind of just a little piece of, that was free. JPs obviously have the budget. the most important part of a budget is how much money do you have to budget? How much money is out there for you to budget? This is called projecting your revenues. And throughout this document, you'll see how different counties project revenue. Sometimes counties have a comptroller. There's 2 or 3 in the state. Most of the time, it's through the treasurer's office. They project how much revenue will be coming in at the next fiscal year, which is calendar year for counties. So they project that money. You can only appropriate 90% of your projections. So that's that your projections are your anticipated revenues. That 90%, say you anticipating $10 million coming into your county general funds, you can only appropriate $9 million of that projected revenue. Projected revenue, that 90% number has a few exceptions, and if you turn to page 19 on your on Eddie's Eddie's handout, you'll see there's some exceptions to special revenues. If there's a dedicated sales tax for maybe a jail or something, you can appropriate all that money that comes in. There's other exceptions. Grants, if you get a federal grant, you can appropriate all that grant money that's coming in. After you know exactly what your anticipated revenue is, after you know what your 90% revenue is, generally, each county official presents their budget to the quorum court. You get it. I'll just tell you, for instance, in Saline County, we figured out what our anticipated revenue is and what our 90% is, and the first budget that got laid on our desk, we were $34,000 in the red. Well, I'm the budget chairman in Saline County. I took that budget and I threw it on the desk and said, guys, we're in the red. Y'all take this back before we even open it up. Y'all are gonna have to figure out a way to cut. It's y'all's office. Y'all take out what you've put in there, and lo and behold, the next budget meeting, we were $900,000 in the black, without even the JPs or the quorum court having to make any decisions whatsoever. So that's that good relationships I talk about that I first talked about, having those good relationships. Because we're not the professionals, the quorum court's not the professionals in each one of these individual offices. They know their offices front and back. Obviously, you want to be as much educated on these offices as possible. I don't know all the intricacies of the assessor's office. I don't know all the court, how the circuit court operates. I don't know all the little bitty things. I kind of have a big picture view of things. Obviously, with my job here, I know quite a bit about different offices, but most of y'all have full-time jobs, and you can't go in their office and know every little thing about their offices. So that was an example of us not even having to make any decisions, and they went back and they cut their budgets. Cutting budgets, say you need to cut some budgets. How would you do that? What would you look at first? What would you do? Would you do a across-the-board cut? No. It doesn't make common sense. It's obviously not very creative. And when it comes to certain offices in the county, if you're cutting their budget, you're also cutting revenues. For example, assessor's office, collector's office, they fund themselves through the different taxing entities. So county general only picks up a small portion. It may be only 10% of the collector's office, of the assessor's office, of the treasurer's office. So it's not very wise to say, oh, let's just do a 5% cut across the board. That's one thing that it sounds good. Maybe right off the bat it sounds good, but it's not creative. It's really not doing what you think it's going to be doing. So I would recommend against that. Talk about cutting. Look on page. I'm gonna switch from Eddie's handout back to the procedural guide on page 24. This is quorum court's bread and butter right here. On page 24 of the procedural guide, 1414-802 outlines what a county shall provide after all those. I think there's 4 examples of what a county shall provide. First being the administrative justice, so you gotta fund your court system. Second being your law enforcement, which is your sheriff's office. Including in the sheriff's office is the custodian of persons accused of convicted crimes. Obviously, that's your jail. C, the tax administration proceedings, obviously the assessor's office, the collections, and the custodian in the custody of the tax proceeds. That's your assessor's office, your collector's office. And then lastly, court and public records management. Those are all things that you have to fund. Those are all things that the quorum court shall fund. Lastly, this is kind of, I think the state threw this in just to mess with us. The last thing being all other services prescribed by state law for performance by each of the several county offices or departments. So basically whatever the state, a new law that's passed and it's a mandate for the counties to fund, you shall fund that as well. But those first four things are what you shall provide. Then you go down, and it's in bold, number 2 on 24 in the second column. The county government acting through the quorum court may provide these, and there's a lot of things that a county can provide, but those aren't required by law. Those are things that you may provide. So, if you look at cutting a budget, I think you start by looking at what a county may provide. Cut those in the budget first. One of the first things I mentioned when Tim was talking this morning is after the quorum court appropriates, votes on an appropriation ordinance and appropriates the money, y'all are done. That's all you can do. So the administration of that appropriation lies with that county office, lies with the executive branch. The county judge, if you appropriate money for equipment, maybe a bulldozer, you don't get to say, hey, I want a John Deere bulldozer, not that cat bulldozer you've been purchasing. You do not get to micromanage those funds once you appropriate those funds. There are examples that the executive branch, once they have their budget and they have all their appropriations out, there's line items out there that they can move some money between line items. One line item they cannot move money on are personnel. Personnel, y'all fix what each employee and elected official gets paid. Fix the compensation of those employees and those elected officials. That's one major role that the quorum court does. You decide what each employee gets paid in the county. So, the county officials, and I was talking to some people during the break, and there was an example of a county official moving some money from another line to provide bonuses for a county employee. You can't do that. The quorum court fixes the amount of compensation for each county employee and elected official. That's very important. I'm going to tell you a little bit about how Saline County does its budget process. I'm not saying it's the best way, the right way. There's other processes out there, and you may be brand new on a quorum court, that there's 8 other veteran quorum court members, and there's a smooth process, and you need to learn that process. But the way the Saline County Quorum Court does it, all the county officials throughout the county present their budget to the county judge who staffs the quorum court. They put a booklet together, they show all the line items, they put everything out there. It shows the bottom line. If we were to fund everything in this budget, it would be X, and that was at $34,000. I was telling you we were in the red earlier. So we then asked the county judge's office to show all the budgets, have a spreadsheet of all the budgets that either have no changes or that are decreased. And we have one spreadsheet that shows that. Then we have a spreadsheet that shows each office that has a budget that's going up in between $1 and $10,000. And we review those. We call those elected officials to the end of the table. They explain why they need a budget increase. We listen to that, we debate, we make a decision on that. Then we talk about the officials that wanna increase their budget more than $10,000. We debate that, and I think that's the reason we went from $34,000 in the red to $900,000 in the black, just like that, was because some of those offices that wanted a new roof on a building or wanted a new facility went back and reworked their budget and took that out of the budget. So then we discussed those $10,000 increases or above. We put that all on paper, and then we go back to the county employees. We decide, should we do a COLA increase, or should we decrease something, or if the anticipated revenue is less than what it was last year. Luckily, we have had an increase in our projections and our anticipated revenue, so we've been able to provide a cost of living increase to county employees. We're very proud of that. I look at it as, I don't want to hire new people. I want to pay people more, create stability in jobs in the county, and pay your people well so you can retain those people, and you don't have a turnover in your county. Turnover costs a lot more money than giving somebody a 3% raise. So that's kind of our philosophy in Saline County. Like I mentioned before, there's plenty of ways to do things, and I think I'm gonna let David explain how Boone County does its budget, and a different process and a different perspective from David.
We start out pretty much the same, and we have kind of evolved. We were in a kind of a fact-finding mode about 10 years ago, and I commented to somebody earlier, it's like echoing what Josh said about learning about the departments. Now, we're not gonna know every single detail in their day-to-day operation and everything, but we can know their operation well enough that whenever they come to us with these requests, say for more money, why, we will understand what their job is better. We will understand if it's relevant or if it's realistic or not a little bit better. If you don't know what they do, then you really don't know what is enough or is too much. But we've kind of scaled back to, if, no new funds required is sweet music to our ears. If you do a budget and then, you're just moving money around that you've already appropriated, it's not costing you any more. So we've kind of refined it on down in the last 2 or 3 years to where if somebody is staying the same or is reducing a little bit, there's not that much need in them coming and talking to us unless somebody thinks there is a particular issue. But now, anybody that wants an increase, now they come to the committee meetings. One point that I might make here, in some counties, there's just no leeway. If you're in a county that's population of say 7,000 or 8,000 or something other like that, and a lot of those, just south of me is Newton County, that is like, what, 3/4 publicly owned. So, in a county like that, there's not a lot of leeway. You've got to fund what you've got to do, and in that situation, the judge and a couple of people may primarily put the budget together. This is one of the deals that I was telling you earlier, that it's not always the way you want it to be. Well, I think a good way is the way Saline County does it, the way we do it. The committee is involved. When the committee's involved, we all learn more. But I got on my crusade and I thought, man, this is right and this is the way it should be. But it's all over 75 counties in the state. It's all over the map how the budget is actually put together. The one certainty is that the quorum court does pass the budget. In whatever form, however it was derived, we do pass it or not. So the exact procedure, I just say keep it as open. We've worn out the word transparency, so I'm not going to say it. It's open. So everybody knows, especially on the quorum court, that I was in a situation where not even everybody on the quorum court knew what was going on. So at least try to get to that page, And if everybody is informed on the quorum court, has an education as to what the offices do, you can just, and it's like Josh said again, you know, working with the elected officials, I mean, that's perfect, you know, coming out in the red, and then they probably cut the budget more than y'all would have if you'd have gone through it. So if you've got a good working relationship, that goes a long way to helping the whole county work better.
That's exactly right. And we've had our newly elected county judges, all the offices have came through this week, and we have a few more next week. But we've mentioned that that example a lot over the last week, and we'll continue to mention that over the next week. Any questions about the budget process? I think David made a good point. Have it open. Every quorum court member has an opportunity. We give every quorum court member an opportunity to make amendments to the budget. It's all in the open up. They can make any motions. We can debate. We can call any official to the end of the table that we want. So it's wide open, and that works for us. And I think it's a good process. Yes, sir.
Could you address, one department habitually goes over budget, it's maybe like the sheriff's department, but public safety is involved. They're running out of money, there's too much left in the year. Maybe ideas about M&M?
If you don't appropriate it, they can't spend it, but I will say, gas, fuel went up a little bit this year, and we had an example in Saline County that the sheriff's department ran out of money in their fuel line. So we amended the budget, I think it was last month, we amended the budget and increased that fuel line item. But yeah, if you don't appropriate it, they're not supposed to spend it. Any questions? Any other questions on budgeting process? Anything? Yes, sir.
When do you typically start your budgeting process in Saline County?
Generally, the elected officials start gathering the information, start kind of putting together and looking at their budgets in October, and then we normally have our first budget meeting early November, and then we officially pass the budget at the December quorum court meeting.
And that has to be done
Yes.
November or December.
You shall pass a budget by the end of the year. Yes, sir.
Bear with me on this for just a minute, but, if a department overspends, they're actually acquiring the debt on behalf of the county. I guess ultimately, the county's gonna have to appropriate the money to pay that debt, whether it be this year or the next year.
I don't know what you're talking about overspending. They're not supposed to spend it.
But they do it, and you know it as well as I do, so here's the question. I know it's ultimately gonna be up to the voters to say this is wrong, this is right, we don't want this or not. So what would be your comments on that?
So the treasurer by law cannot write a check for something that would put that fund in the red. By law, they can't.
So they can be prosecuted if they do.
I would let your prosecuting attorney know if that happened. Other questions?
All right, if there's no other questions, we'll move ahead on the agenda, maybe get to lunch a little bit quicker. Next on our agenda is we offer a lot of things. You know, Brandy mentioned that there's risk management counties that are in our risk management pool here at the Association of Arkansas Counties. We have approximately 56 counties in our pool. With that membership comes benefits.
As Josh said, my name is Becky Comet. I am the Member Benefits Manager here at the AAC. Under that title, I do a few things. I take care of some benefits for our risk management counties, like Josh said, but another thing that I do is I seek out businesses that are willing to give discounts on goods and services to county government employees, and that is for their personal use. It's not just elected officials, it's all county government employees. Okay, because we all know that county government employees don't make a whole lot of money. So we want to help them out any way that we can. So that's one of the things that I do. What you have in front of you is a list of discounts that we have available to county government employees for their personal use. Now, one disclaimer, typically, if a county needs a new computer, they will ask me what kind of discounts we have with Dell at this particular time, because they run specials. We do have Dell, we have HP as well. So sometimes counties will use that for county use, and that's totally fine. But for the most part, like I said, this is for county employees and their personal use. Since you are a JP, this is also available to all of you, okay? Just so you understand that, because I've had JPs ask, is that something I can use? Yes, you absolutely can. Let me see what I'm doing here. What you have is a list, but I want to show you on our website. Oh, Christy's got me. Oh, okay. Christy's got me ready to go. All of these things are also on our website. That's what the website looks like when you first pull it up, okay? If you don't know the address, it is www.arcounties, COUNTIES.org, okay? And if you've never been to the website, you need to go and kind of peruse around, because there's a lot of cool stuff on the website. Now, if you go to the members tab, okay, over there on the right-hand side, oh, Steve's doing that for me, isn't he good? This is what it will pop up, okay? Now, the first time you go, you need to go to this request access, fill in that information, and our communications team will send you a username and password, okay? Once you have that username and password, then you fill that in at the bottom where it says member login. And Christy is kind enough to do that for me.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. No, I type it. Oh, you should see me when I was doing it for the other folks. I type kind of slow, especially on an unfamiliar computer. Just throwing that out there. Okay, so this is what's going to pop up. You scroll down, and you'll begin to see all the discounts. Okay, many of our discounts have a link and a code of some kind that you can use. A lot of them are things that you can purchase online. Let me mention a couple of things in particular. Some of our most used discounts. One is the cell phone companies, okay? We have an 18% discount with Verizon. Let me give you a little disclaimer on Verizon. When you go, there's a link with Verizon. These are in alphabetical order, by the way. I didn't want to get any, top billing for any kind of particular vendor, so kind of left that in alphabetical order. When you get to Verizon, you'll see that there's it says download flyer here, okay? And it'll explain exactly what you need to do to get the Verizon discount, okay? There's a link, a web address that you'll need to go to. Now let me just give you a bit of information here, and I want to read this correctly here. You will have to click on the part that says don't have a work email address. Verizon is looking for government email addresses, and across the board, across our state, we typically don't have anything that's recognized as a government email address. Because if you look at all the different counties, you'll see URLs at Yahoo, at Gmail, at Hotmail, at Windstream, at whatever under the sun. And they're not recognized as government emails. So you go to that, fill out the information. They will ask for proof of employment. So a county ID will do.
The card you're getting.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good. That was next on the list. If your county has an ID of any kind, that's fine. Some counties do, some counties don't. The card that you got your picture taken for, and I don't know if everybody's gotten their picture taken, but that little card that you got your picture taken and it says, can I borrow yours? Is that yours? Thank you so much. This thing says Association of Arkansas Counties, has your county name, it has your title as Justice of the Peace and what district, so it has all your information on there. You can use that as a form of ID as well, okay? And that's with all of our discounts. That's one reason we have that card, is to use that for the discount. Anyway, so you fill all that out, and Verizon should give you their discount. I did have a lady tell me the other day that she had changed her plan. She had the government discount. She had our county government discount. Changed her plan for some unlimited things and this, that, and she said when she changed her plan, they took away her discount. They wouldn't let her use the discount. Don't ask me. I don't know. I don't know how they work. I don't know what they do. I don't know how that works. But since I found that out, and I just found it out yesterday, so since I found that out, I will be making a phone call, but I'll find that out. AT&T made it incredibly easy for us. There's a link. You go to the link. In fact, it's a dedicated link. It says AT&T law, and then it says dash Arkansas County, so it's just for us. You go to that link, fill it out, fill out the information, and you're good to go. So that, and AT&T is a 17% discount. I think that takes care of cell phone companies. The next most used discount that we have are for some of our theme parks. Magic Springs, Silver Dollar City, in the summertime, Wild River Country. There's another one up in the Fort Smith area called Parrot Island. So those are some of our most asked about discounts. Magic Springs has a link. Go to that. It's super, super easy. They will sell season passes online, season passes as well as day passes. Silver Dollar City, let me give you a little explanation there. There's a link and there's a promo code that you put in. They will only, with the deal that we have with them now, they will only sell one-day passes online at a discount. However, if you want a season pass from Silver Dollar City, you buy your one-day ticket, okay, online, and that's the only way that you get the 15% discount. You can't just show up at the gate and say, I'm an Arkansas County government employee. No, they won't give it to you. You have to do it online. Anyway, but when you get there, you take your ticket to the gate and you say, I'd like to upgrade to a season pass. The last 2 years, it's been a $35 fee to upgrade to a season pass, which is a heck of a deal, I'm just gonna tell you. I don't know what their, like I said, hadn't changed in the last couple of years. I don't anticipate it might go up slightly, but it's still a pretty good deal to just add that little bit to get a season pass. Wild River Country does sell season passes online up until June 1st, I think it is. They only do the season passes until then, and then after that, it's just one-day passes. Let me see here. Got that, I got that. Let me talk about email just for a second. Sometimes some of our vendors offer special deals. Dell is notorious for having special sales, flash sales, all kinds of special deals, especially around graduation time, around Black Friday, Christmas. They are great about doing those special deals. And I typically will send those out in an email blast, okay? And I'm sure Christy's going to talk to you a little bit about listserv and email and all that kind of stuff. But that's one of our first lines of communication with y'all is through email. So, and we have something called listserv, and I'm gonna let Christy explain all that maybe. It's a little above my pay grade. I'm kidding. Technology-wise, it's like a giant email chat. That's the best way I can put it. Anyway, so I will send out information in an email that tells you about any special deals that we're having, okay? And I think won't all the JPs be on the listserv? No. Not? No?
No. It's one JP per county.
Okay.
Because of this meeting laws.
Right, gotcha. Okay, I wasn't sure on that one, so I'm glad you told me that. So one JP in your county will be on the listserv. Let me ask you to do this, whoever it winds up being, okay, let me ask you to do this, and I do this for all the elected officials as well. I don't have an email address for everybody in the county. That would be about 30,000 email addresses. I don't have that, okay? But what I do have listserv, I do have all the elected officials, okay? And obviously one of y'all per county. So what I do is I send out those special emails, and I always try to remember at the bottom to say, please pass this along to all in your office. So if the one JP could then pass that along, just forward it to all the others, then we'll be good, and everybody will have the information. Does that make sense? Okay, so if it's you, get ready to forward. Let's see, another thing with that ID card, many of our things are online, many of our discounts are online, but we do have some that are not online. For example, and I don't have this in the list because it only, at this particular point, pertains to 4 different counties: Benton County, Washington County, Faulkner County, and Pulaski County. Also have a discount with Zips Car Wash. So just show them your card, and the HR director in each one of those counties has that information. Okay, so if you want to know about a discount for Zips Car Wash and you're one of those 4 counties, ask your HR folks. Okay, if you're not in one of those counties, just wait, because Zips is growing and they're going to expand and there'll be more. And that's one thing that you'll use the card for. Another place that I use my card on a regular basis is at a hotel. I go in and I ask 2 things. What's your AARP discount? Because I qualify and not all of you qualify, so ha ha ha. And the second is what's your government discount? Okay, and I just take the best one, okay, because they won't want you to take both. So I take the best one. If they ask for an ID, and they don't always for whatever reason, but if they ask for an ID, then I've got my card and I can show them. One time in 6 years, one time, I was told that I could not use that discount as a county government employee. That was only for state and federal. And I said, well, my retirement is with the state, so I count that as state, so there you go. Anyway, so that's another good place to use that card, and just keep it in your wallet so that you can use that. Okay, I want to finish up with a couple of partnerships that we have, that the AAC has, that I think are programs that can be a great benefit to county employees. One is the Dave Ramsey Financial Peace Government, and I emphasize government. Some of you may be familiar with the Dave Ramsey Financial Peace Program. Teaches some excellent financial principles. I've been through the class myself, and actually a couple times, and I learned something every time. I learned something new every time. It's a great, great program. Now, what they have done is they have modified the program. If you're familiar with it through your church, they've taken out a lot of the scriptural references. The only scriptural references that they keep are for historical purposes. And there are many, many government agencies that use this with their folks. Police departments, Border Patrol, there's a whole list of folks that use this. So it is okay to use it in a government entity. This is not something that typically the county would pay for, unless of course y'all want to appropriate that money to do that. But typically the employee would pay for it. But when you're working, since you're working through our partnership, it is offered to the employees at a discounted rate. So they get all the materials at a discounted rate. So that's kind of cool. Okay. And another program is Southwest EAP, which is Employee Assistance Program. They offer a counseling program that is designed for county employees and their families. I am so excited about that. Not just the employee, it's for their family. They can do training for an entire office or a specific small group, which when it gets to personnel issues, if there's any challenges that some of your personnel are having, they have a whole host of topics that they can do training about. And if that process, if that challenge moves forward, then that can be very helpful, as I'm sure Brandy's next. No, she's already gone. Brandy will tell you that it's very helpful if you can prove that you've provided some sort of training, you know, in any kind of personnel issues. So that's very helpful. They will also come and do crisis counseling in a county that has had some kind of a catastrophic event, like a tornado, a flood, a fire, or the death of an employee. Okay, they will come to the county You don't have to go to them. They will come to the county and they will be happy to counsel with anybody that feels like they need somebody to talk to. Let's see. Southwest EAP, because of the partnership that we have with them, now this is something that would be, I guess you could, it depends on how y'all decide to do it. Again, you know, there's 75 counties and a bunch of different ways to do things. The county could pick up the cost. It could be payroll deducted from the employee, but here's the cost. $19 per employee per year. Let me let that sink in for just a second. $19 per employee per year, and that's for the employee and their family. Anybody in their family can receive services as well. And to have that available to you for training for the office, help with any personnel issues, as well as just the counseling services they provide, that is a pretty good deal. So that's something that y'all might want to consider as well. And there's information on that sheet on how to get a hold of them. Okay?
Well, hello. You've all seen me wandering around with the camera. That's one of the things that we do in the communications department. And our communications staff is comprised of 2 people. Me, I've been here at the AAC for almost 5 years. It will be 5 years in April. Holland Duran, our communications coordinator, she has been here for nearly 2 years. I come with a background in writing and editing for magazines and newspapers, and Holland kind of balances me out. She has more of a technical background. She came to us from a web developer and web marketing company, so she's really good with the technology. And you'll see us at your meetings, and not your quorum court meetings, but like your annual meetings in April and such. I'm just gonna briefly touch on the fact that a couple of years ago, we did start automating things. So we do have online registration for, say, our August conference. We also have some materials available online that you can order. The compliance guide being one. I'll grab that. Yeah, the compliance guide. If any of you guys want to flip through that, you're welcome to. That's my copy. The compliance guide is a really good reference tool for county and district officials. It offers not every state statute that covers county government, but it does include most of them. So if you need to know something about voter registration or what have you, you can look it up and see what the code says about your particular question. Okay, and those are available for $65. I've already had a couple of people ask me about them. If you want to purchase one today, I can help you with that. We do credit card, debit card, check, whatever you want to do. All right. Another thing that we publish, we do a lot of publishing around here. We do a lot of videos, we do a lot of pictures. After every election cycle, we put together a county and district officials directory. This is going to contain contact information for all the county elected officials. It's going to have a list of all the JPs in each county. It also contains information on state legislators and your U.S. congressmen. This one is outdated. This is the old one. I'm working on the new one, and it's going to look like this. In terms of distribution, everybody will get a copy of it. Okay, and then there will be a spot on the website where if you wanted to order additional copies, you could do that. Okay. And it's going to be, the new one won't be be available until after the first of the year. Becky mentioned the listserv. That's a little difficult to explain. Email is one of our major tools for communication, but because of the meeting laws, only one JP per county can be on the listserv, and it's really just kind of a group email thread, so that a JP in one county can ask JP in another county, well, how do you do this, or do you have any advice for that, or that sort of thing. And it's typically, isn't it the 75-member body? And so, what's that? Yeah, one from each county. So hopefully whoever it is in your county who's designated to be on the listserv should be sharing information with you. A lot of times the county clerks will share information with you. But I'm going to leave that at that. Some of the main areas of communication from my department will come to you via an e-newsletter that we distribute every Friday morning. When you guys signed in, you put your email addresses down. I'll go ahead and add you to the newsletter list. It's just a real timely way to get you guys information, okay? And we also do print the County Lines magazine quarterly. This is that's the most recent issue. And if I did not have enough copies for everyone, you can find this on our website, an electronic version. And I do suggest that you start with this issue of the magazine and read through it, because we just celebrated our 50-year anniversary, and there's a really good write-up on the history of the association in there. Okay, and of course, we kind of talked about the website earlier, www.arcounties.org. And we are on, we do a lot of communication through social media, mainly Facebook and Twitter. We'll post news items or announcements, your pictures from today, that sort of thing. So this is an example of what the e-newsletter might look like. If you're wondering why the Beatles are on there, it's because our August conference marked our 50th anniversary. So you go back to 1968, we kind of had a Beatles thing going on. We had a Beatles tribute band. And that particular newsletter was promoting the fact that, you know, the agenda for the meeting is available, you can go here to register, and that sort of thing. Okay, so if your email changes and you still want to receive the e-newsletter every Friday, please let me know, because otherwise you're not going to get it anymore. It's really important that you keep us up to date with your contact information. Okay, so there's another example of a County Lines magazine that we put out recently. It is quarterly, printed quarterly, and it's direct mailed to every county and district elected official. So after the first of the year, you should start receiving it. If you're not, give us a call, okay? And we'll double check your address, make sure we've got that correct. What you'll find in the magazine is regularly are columns written by our policy team. Issues will come up and they'll write about them. Josh is writing about 911 reform for the next magazine. There will be a message from our board president. There's always a message from our association executive director, Chris Valines, who you saw in the video earlier. this is another thing we do with the photos that we take. We put them in the magazine, so everybody who gets the magazine can look at the photos. Everybody likes to see pictures of themselves. Okay, maybe not. Okay, again, the website is www.arcounties.org. We revamped it. We redid our website about 2 years ago. It had gotten really outdated. It was not user-friendly. It was not mobile-friendly. And so we've changed all that. We went through a process with the developer and created what you saw earlier when Becky was talking. And I do think it's a good resource for you. So we'll have events and news that will appear down here. We try to keep this as updated as possible. There's some history and information about this AAC here. The publication library is probably going to be a big one for you. That's where the salary surveys, your procedural manuals, and things like that are posted. I am taking video of this meeting today for those JPs who were not able to attend because of the weather. And I will upload that video once I've edited it to, let's see, up here where it says media. If you click on media, you're going to find articles, press releases, videos, that sort of thing. Okay. Again, our primary social media accounts are Facebook and Twitter. How many of you are on Facebook? Okay, good. Go follow us on Facebook. We'll post photos from meetings like this there. We'll share news items. We'll share announcements. We do the same with Twitter. How many of you are on Twitter? Okay, fewer, but that's still good. If you're on Twitter, go ahead and follow us there too, so you can keep up with what's going on, what we're doing, and that sort of thing. I will mention that following your state legislators on Facebook and Twitter is a good idea. We follow them all just so we can keep up with what they're saying, with what they're doing, that sort of thing. It'd be probably helpful for you guys as we go into the session. Okay, this is what our Facebook page looks like. In this particular post, we shared an article on voting equipment. In this post, we shared information about a legislative conference hosted by the National Association of Counties, which, by the way, every county in Arkansas is a member of the National Association of Counties. The AAC pays the dues for every county to be a member. All right, this is what our Twitter looks like. This little photo right here with our building and the Capitol in the back, that's kind of our trademark photo. If you're looking for us on Facebook or Twitter, look for that. You can search for us by doing @75AR Counties. We should pop up pretty easily. Here again, we had a post about something that was going on with the National Association of Counties. And in this post, not everything is really serious. This particular post was an article about the Little River Courthouse Christmas light display. So that'll give you a taste of what other counties are doing. All right, that was quick and sweet. Especially from the communications department, right? Do you guys have any questions at all for me? I mean, it's hard to put everything that we do in one presentation. We do lots of publications, we do lots of videos, we do lots of meetings. It's just, it's something different every day in our department. Okay? No questions? All right. Thank you guys for your time and attention.
All right, now we're to the spot on the program where if Mike Rainwater is gonna tell us about if it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, don't let anybody tell you it's not a duck. So, Rainwater, without any further ado.
Thank you. Thank you all. My job here is to put an exclamation point on some of the things that have been said today. And I came early because I thought we might need to compress the time, and also I like to get into the flow and see what's going on. And the problem with this, I tell you, county government is very, very complex. There's a lot of moving parts. Association of Arkansas Counties does a fabulous, fabulous, fabulous job, and it's progressive work. Every year there's more added, more added, more added, and so the complexity of what AAC is doing is tremendous, and the benefit programs are outstanding. If your county's not a member of the association's benefit programs, then you really need to take a hard look at that and ask some hard questions. I've been working with Arkansas Counties now for 33 years. The Risk Management Fund is the Liability Defense Fund program, and that was started, we started talking about it in '85 when we implemented it in '87, August of '87 with 13 counties. And so now it's pretty robust. It's a very robust and vigorous program. My job today is an outsider, really, because I've been outside litigation counsel for the Risk Management Fund all those years. I was involved in developing that program. It was modeled really after the Arkansas Municipal League's program, and it's a very, very well-run program. But I've got a handout here. I kind of want to go over that just a little bit and highlight a few things. Again, I think most of these things have already been talked about, but I wanted to just put an exclamation point on a few things. We start out with quorum court meetings. Y'all, I heard some discussion on that. I've tried to give you a summary on that. I don't have enough time to spend a whole lot of time on that, but if you look on page 2, quorum court action, I think it's important to realize that you only act through ordinances. You know, I heard talk about motions. Well, a motion is to get something before the body so you can discuss it. But when it comes time to actually implement that, you're going to implement it in the form of an ordinance. It has to be compared with a resolution. In the ordinance world, you got appropriation ordinances and non-appropriation ordinances. So your function is what? Hold the purse and set the policy for the county. Those are your two jobs if you're a member of the legislative branch of county government. It's important to realize we have 3 branches of county government, and you're only in one of those 3 branches. And so when you think about these things, try to understand how the whole thing fits together. And what's cool about this is it's a body. It's a legislative body. So when you come, I know a lot of y'all have ideas about things you're going to do and how they ought to be done, but I would really recommend that you listen, get in the flow, and kind of see how things are going. Because you're joining an organization that's already moving, it's been operating for a long time, and things are getting done, and so as you learn, you can begin to tweak on that. But a resolution is really nothing. A resolution is just an expression. It's kind of like, hey, we want to tell you something. But it has no legal power, okay? You're not accomplishing anything through a resolution. You got to have an organizational ordinance, as you know, in order to get this thing going. Why? Well, we want order. What's the whole purpose of government? Maintain order. I mean, we're an orderly society. Our freedom is an orderly freedom. We don't allow disorder. That's why disorderly conduct is a crime. Okay? Harassing communication is a crime. Criminal trespass is a crime. Drinking in public is a crime. All those are crimes because the government is there to maintain order, ensure security, and keep the peace. And like was said earlier by Josh, when he was talking about 1414-802A, when it comes to the purse holding function, you got your A and your B duties. Your A duties are your shall duties, and your B duties are your may duties. So we have to fund the shall duties first. Why? They relate to order. They relate to delivering to the people an orderly society so that our freedom has real meaning. Okay? So we have to impose that on ourselves. We have to function in an orderly manner. That's why we have Robert's Rules of Orders. That's why we have an organizational ordinance, because y'all have to decide for yourself what orderly process you're gonna use, but you have to have a process, and you have to have agreed on the orderly process. You don't have to use Robert's Rules of Order, but of course everybody does, okay? It's been around forever, and it is the accepted method, but you're not bound by that, but you do have to have a set of rules that you're gonna run by. So that's kind of page 4, and I've got a short guide to running an effective meeting on that. Later on, well, let me just flip over real fast what's on my mind. Go over to page 28 real fast, because I heard discussion on county boards. You know, it's like, well, why on earth does the county judge get to pick the chair of the board? Well, that's part of the separation of powers doctrine, okay? We want to separate the powers. We don't want to give all the power to the legislative branch. We don't want to give all the power to the executive branch. And we don't want to give all the power to the judicial branch. We want to separate those powers. Why do we want to separate the powers? We don't trust anybody. Why do we not trust anybody? We're a society that's built on an understanding how the world works, which is a biblical understanding. We come out of the Reformation. We're a Reformation-based society, which means we actually believe organizationally, whether you believe individually or not, that the heart is desperately wicked and deceitful above all things. Who can know it? Okay? And since we believe that as a foundational truth, we're not willing to let anybody have all the power. So we have separated those powers, like it says in Isaiah 33:22, it says the Lord is what? He's the lawgiver. The Lord is the king, and the Lord is the judge. Okay? Well, it says He will save us. Okay? We can trust Him. We can't trust each other. So what we've done is we've figured out how to build a society that functions, notwithstanding the fact that we really don't want to give ultimate power to anybody. Okay? So here we are. We're trying to build a society that's orderly. We want to function orderly. We want to deliver order. But we have to do that through fallible people. So we've come up with a system to do it. It's a time-honored system. Okay? Our system rolls forward from 1066 AD. When the Europeans came over and invaded the British Isles, they set up a whole new way of doing things. And all that has flowed all the way down to us. It's called the common law. Okay? Matter of fact, we have a statute in Arkansas that says if there's not any other law, go back to the law of England and apply the law of England, which is the common law, because we have a society that's been rolling forward all these years. So when somebody comes in and wants to make a fundamental change to the way the world works, like changing the separation of powers doctrine, you need to ask yourself a really hard question. You know, why are we all of a sudden able to do away with what the wisdom of the ages has said how we need to run our lives? Okay? So it's very, very important. So county government, county boards, page 28 real fast. You know, what kind of boards are out there? Well, there's all kinds of county boards out there, and you have all kinds of power to create county boards. But you got to ask yourself, you know, what kind of county board do I need? And how are those boards going to be operated? It's going to be an advisory board, it's going to be an administrative board, it's going to be a facilities board. All kinds of power that's out there, but what I would tell you is, all these ideas that you have, run them through the filter of experience. Go back to the Association of Counties, go back to your own association and form court, and allow people to persuade you as to how the most efficient, effective, and wise way it is to set up things, okay? Because it's very, very important as a legislative branch, you not only hold the purse, but you set the policy for the county. So we're going to be orderly. Go back to page 6. We're going to have Robert's Rules of Order. I've got you a little cheat sheet there. And then we come down to page 7, home power rule. What does that mean? It means we can do anything that's not illegal or unconstitutional. Bottom line. And a lot of the rules you say, well, why can't we do that? Well, it's illegal or it's unconstitutional. You say, well, why is it illegal or unconstitutional? You can get in the law, you can get in the history, you can figure out why it's that way. But I'm going to tell you, it all makes sense. All the pieces fit together. It doesn't mean it's perfect, but it does mean that we have a system that does work. And our recommendation is you jump in there and figure out how to become part of that system, okay? So we have home rule power. Home rule power, what's the problem with all that home rule power? You gotta have money. You gotta have money, okay? So you gotta have taxing power. You have to have the ability to set these budgets. You have to have the ability to forecast. We don't allow deficit spending in Arkansas. Why not? Well, basically, we've been bankrupt before. We know that's a terrible way to run our lives. So we adopted a new constitution in 1874. We said we're not gonna allow deficit spending. And so we don't allow deficit spending except in those rare instances where we have modified that constitution to allow borrowing. And so we do have certain limited powers to borrow, short-term financing and things like that. But fundamentally, you've got to figure out how you're going to guard the public fisc. I'm on page 8. Now, when I write these articles, these are not my personal opinions, okay? Nobody cares about my personal opinion. No judge cares about any lawyer's personal opinion. What they want is you to come in and bring the authority on that particular point. So when we write these, we're quoting the authority. It's going to be the Constitution, it's going to be the statutes, or it's going to be the case law decision that governs, okay? So when we say you're the guardian of the public fisc, that's not my words, that's the court's words. So you're guarding the public fisc. It's your job to make sure that we are functioning in a way that's financially responsible. So let's look at that page 8. It's the job of the quorum court to guard the public fisc by what? Adopting, amending, or repealing an appropriation ordinance which incorporates by reference the provisions of any county budget or portion of a county budget. So what are your powers? You can adopt a budget, you can amend a budget, or you can repeal a budget, okay? It's a fluid document, and you can modify it. But there are rules as to what you can do. You cannot take off your legislative hat, step over an executive branch, and begin to administer the funds that you've appropriated. And if you try to do indirectly what you can't do directly, then you're going to get your hands slapped, because you cannot tie the hands of the executive officials down so tight that in effect what you're doing is you're now administering the executive branch of county government. Does that make sense? Okay? So let's just roll through this real fast on page 8. You are the appropriating authority. Officials must live within the appropriations. So like the example over there, well, we all know they overspend. No, they don't overspend. Why do they not overspend? Because they can't overspend. Okay? Why can they not overspend? Well, we gave that authority to the treasurer to make sure that we're not spending money we don't have. And how do we do that? We operate according to a budget. We have a line item for everything. We know exactly where we are. We keep up with all the money as we go. And when you run out of money, you run out of money. So what's the real problem? They're going to come back to you and want more money. Okay? And you're going to say, well, we set a budget. Now you spent all the money in your line item on that budget. Now you want more money. And the problem is, if it's over in the 14.802A category, which is administrative justice, law enforcement, detention, the court records, and there's one other thing in there, I can't remember what it is, then they got you in a shall category, okay? When it comes down to shall, you have a responsibility, and so that's where a little of this tension comes in between the executive branch and the legislative branch. So how do you deal with that? Treat this budget as a live item. It's a dynamic document. Every meeting, look at those line items, ask that treasurer's report, see where you are on the budget, okay? Forecast where you're going to end up. You know, don't get yourself in a situation you're going to run out of money in September, because you still got October, November, and December, and you can't shut your jail down, okay? So there's things you got to do along the way, and that's where you become the guardian of the public fisc. How do you deal with that? You deal with that through your budgeting authority, okay, which is appropriating. You can adopt a budget, you can amend a budget, or you can repeal a budget. They have to live within the appropriations. Those appropriations are presumptively valid. The executive branch gets to administer the appropriation, and this last one is a good one. On bottom page 8, quorum court's appropriation authority includes the authority to what? Amend or repeal prior appropriations. So you can give, and then you can turn around and you can change that unless the money's already spent. Okay? So if you put it in there as a line item and the money is spent, you can't undo what's been done. You can only undo what hadn't been spent yet, so you can pull that back and begin to administer those funds. Okay? Now, conflicts of interest, we always have to mention that. And I'm going to give you the acid test on conflict of interest. If you look at page 9, about just below the fold there, impact requires abstention. Interest does not require abstention. What does that mean? Well, it means we live in a really small place called Arkansas. Okay? We have 3 million people. Texas has got 28 million people. It's unfair, but that's just the way it works. You know, they got 6 degrees of separation. We got 2 degrees of separation in Arkansas. Okay? So the real world is you're going to be stepping all over your relatives, your friends, people you went to church with. I mean, there's just all kinds of stuff out there. So you say, when can I vote? When can I not vote? The bottom line is, if it impacts you or your direct family, then you need to abstain. If it's just something you have an interest in because of your friends, your relatives, or whatever, then you don't have to abstain. And you can read the exact words on there But understand that there's between impact and interest, okay? You'll be interested in a lot of things, so they will affect your family and your friends and business associates and people like that, but you only have to abstain if there's an impact. Quorum Court's money power, I've already talked about that. You can use your power, but you can't abuse your power. There's prioritized authority, and then you have no authority to either what? I'm on page 10, middle of the page. You cannot expend the funds that have been appropriated, and you cannot administer the county laws that have been enacted. So you hold the purse, you set the policy through your ordinances, because that's the only way you speak really effectively is through your ordinances, but you can't administer either one. You can't spend the money, and you can't carry out the tasks that you set forth for somebody else to do. Quorum Court Committee authority, that's where I thought it was a minute ago on page 10, and let's just read that. An act required by the Quorum Court cannot be handled by committee, even the committee of the whole. Rather, the approval must be granted by the full court in regular session. So you say, well, what is a committee anyway? It's just a tool that you can use to try to get the business of the Quorum Court done, okay? It has no power. It's not the Quorum Court. So all it's doing is making a suggestion to the full body, okay? Even if you formed a committee of the whole, it's still not the Quorum Court. You got to go back into session as a Quorum Court. You got to vote as Quorum Court members. And so really the committee itself has no power, okay? What it's doing is it's offering suggestions to the body as a whole. The reason we all get tangled up on the Freedom of Information Act, by the way, on bottom of page 10 is because that's the law of Arkansas. When we say that's the law of Arkansas, what are we saying? We're saying that's the public policy of the state of Arkansas. And who are the policy makers? Well, the policy makers are going to be those people in the legislative branch, executive branch, judicial branch, or the people themselves. The people themselves set policy through the Constitution, okay? The others through their various separate branch powers. But that becomes the policy under which we operate. And in Arkansas, like it or lump it, the Freedom of Information Act basically says where two or more are gathered, the FOI applies, okay? So if you have two or more and they have the power to actually make a decision, then the FOI applies. Now, if you have two elected officials get together, they don't have the power to do anything as two elected officials. But when you get two Quorum Court members together and you begin to communicate with each other, then what happens is you can begin to function as a body in a serial manner, and that violates the rules because everything you do must be done in the sunshine where everybody can see it, okay? You can't do it by email, you can't do it by telephone, you can't do it by, everybody passing around where everybody's already figured out what they're going to do before they get there, because the process of figuring that out would in itself be illegal, because that's called a serial meeting, which is illegal. And you say, well, how on earth are we going to function? Well, we have to figure out how to function. There are ways to function. We know how to function. So it's things like this email thing. We just have one Quorum Court member on there from each county. We exchange information. But if you want to take that information and begin to implement it, then you got to go through the actual process, legislative process that's required. A committee becomes what? They don't have the power to make the decision, but they do have the power to meet, and where they're meeting as a committee of the Quorum Court, then they're under the same FOI rules that everybody else is. Okay, we don't get to do things in secret. Believe it or not, it even applies to lawyers. All my files are wide open. So I have to function understanding all my files are wide open. So what do? We just keep a lot of stuff in our head. We just write down stuff we want them to read. We'll write down stuff we don't want them to read. And so you have to function like it's going to end up on the front page of the newspaper the next day. And that's okay. You can begin to function that way. And honestly, I don't have a particular problem with it, okay, in most scenarios. All right. Anybody got a question so far? I've only got just a little bit of time. But I love questions. Anybody got a question? All right, let's keep moving just a little bit here then.
We got one.
I got one.
I saw one. Where is it? Yes, sir.
Let's say we appropriate the budget for the sheriff's department.
Yes, sir.
I'll try to tone it down. And so
You're
he
excited.
goes and blows all the money, but it's a shall. So he comes back and says, I gotta have more money.
Yeah.
What do we do?
Welcome to Quorum Court. What you need to do is keep an eye on it through the year, because you know how much you appropriate for 12 months, so you know in 6 months it'll be about halfway gone. If it's, instead of 50% being gone, it's 75%, then we need to have a meeting and we need to talk about it, where we're gonna do that, probably in the quorum court meeting. It's okay. But you may have a budget committee that actually begins to look at those things, and so you can begin to address those as you go. So, it is very complicated, it is very difficult, but it's been working a long time, it's very functional, we know how to do these things, and y'all will get in the flow and it'll begin to make sense to you. But keeping your eye on the ball, the financial ball, as part of your job, is the guardian of the public fisc. So that's a very, very relevant question. But you can't do it by yourself, you know. You're a member of a quorum court, okay? You have no authority individually. Sorry about that.
Marriages.
Well, okay, you can marry somebody. We don't even care about that. If you don't want to marry somebody, go marry them. Here's the rule on marriage, by the way. You gotta have one policy. It's gotta be applied uniformly. So you can't say, I marry this crowd, but I don't marry that crowd. So if you want to be in the marrying business, be in the marrying business, and everybody that comes to you is entitled to be married. You cannot pick and choose who you're going to marry and who you're not going to marry, okay? So it's kind of an all or nothing situation in the marrying world now, all right? All right, let's look at page 11, real quick. Remember, I'm an outsider. My reason for being here is to put an exclamation point on it. And so you get mad at me, it doesn't matter because I'm not with the AAC, so I can tell you all the stuff you can't do. And so that's where we are. But take a look at page 11 real fast. Quorum court power versus elected power. I've already kind of explained this, but I'll give you just a little bit of more information. We'll go through it just real quickly. Your powers, just like I said, on your policy-making powers. If you want to marry somebody, you got to have one uniform policy. It's got to apply uniformly to all persons similarly situated, without regard to one of those criteria that they have a legal right to make a choice. So you have to function in a manner that's rational and equal. Okay? Well, in the policy-making world, you have power to enact general policies. You don't have the power to enact specific policies, okay, or special policies. You can't bring in one elected official and have one set of rules for that elected official and have another set of rules for another elected official. You operate in a general policy-making manner where it follows uniformly on all of the elected officials, okay? But you do exercise local legislative authority, and you can do anything that's not expressly prohibited by the Constitution or the law for the affairs of the county. Since the county has home rule powers, then there's a whole lot of power you can do, but you come back to, you gotta have the money, and you can either execute the law, yes, sir.
Well, and then, I've been sitting there thinking after you answered that last question, but in that shall scenario, it don't have to be shall like they want it to be shall. It could just be a minimum amount. It doesn't say that you offer them a minimal amount, that's shall.
I have no problem with that concept, but here's where we find ourselves, okay? In the patrol function for the sheriff's office, for example, the law requires you have a sheriff.
There you go.
It doesn't require you to have any deputies.
There you go.
So you got to ask yourself if you want to get reelected or not. Because everybody in the county wants deputies, and they want one they see rolling up and down their road. If they don't see the deputy roll up and down their road, as far as they're concerned, they don't have any law enforcement protection, and they're not going to like that. So y'all got to figure out how to do the impossible, which is take a little bit of money you got and please everybody all at the same time. And you got to do that in a way that makes sense. So you're exactly right. On the patrol function, for example, we have no duty to protect anybody in the county, believe it or not. When it says protect and serve on the side of a police officer's car, that means we have the opportunity to protect and serve. It doesn't mean we have the duty to protect and serve. Okay? So you do not have to have any deputies. You're exactly right. And y'all can decide as a policymaker, because you get to make the decision in the employment arena how many employees you're going to have and exactly how much money they're going to make. That's one of the specific areas that the quorum court has. So we're going to know who to blame. It's the quorum court, because y'all are the ones that decide exactly how many you're going to have. Okay? So you can make a decision on the patrol function. We're not going to have any deputies. We're just going to have a sheriff because that's the minimum the law requires. No problem. You can do that. But here's the problem over on the jail side. On the jail side, you don't have that luxury, and here's why. When we take somebody's freedom away from them and lock them up, we have the concomitant duty to protect them. Which means now we gotta figure out how we're gonna protect them, because we have the duty to protect all those people in the jail, because we took their duty under the Second Amendment to bear arms away from them. We took their opportunity to run away from the bad guy, their enemy, who happens to be in jail with them. We took that away from them. So we have to have adequate supervision, and yet the law doesn't say what adequate is. Okay? We have a system of jail standards, but the jail standards don't say how much supervisor staff you have. And the reason is every jail configuration is different. So somebody's got to make a policy decision on how we're going to do that. So we're telling the sheriff, you better make sure you have adequate supervision. What's the legal standard? You cannot be deliberately indifferent to a necessary need to protect the people in the jail. Well, what's necessary? Somebody's got to figure that out. So the sheriff's going to come to y'all, going to ask for a certain budget for a certain number of people, because you got to set them out line by line, person by person on the budget, and set the price on each one of those. You're going to add that up, and that's going to be your budget for the jail. Okay? And in that circumstance, you absolutely have to fund it because you have a constitutional duty, and the Constitution trumps everything else. Yes, yes, over here. Does that make sense? Yes.
And then we could be sued, right, if something went wrong and the sheriff said, I didn't have the funding.
As long as you wear your legislator hat, you are slick. No. You can be sued, because anybody can be sued, but you wouldn't be liable, because you look on page 27, when you're wearing your legislator hat, you have legislative immunity. Isn't that a beautiful thing? Do what?
Are there not short cases where a court is being sued?
Well, all kinds of, anybody can be sued. The issue is not can you be sued, the issue is can you be held liable if you are sued, and they're going to sue the county. And they're going to say you are the official policymaker of the county with respect to holding the purse and setting the policy. So if the sheriff comes and says, I need supervision, and you say no, then somebody could file a lawsuit and say the county, through its official policymaker, the quorum court, was deliberately indifferent to a necessary need to protect those people whose freedom was taken from them so they can't protect themselves. And yes, the county could be sued. The quorum court is nothing more than the county acting through its legislative branch of county government. What you need to ask yourself is, can I be sued? Okay? When it says you have legislative immunity, you have immunity as an individual member of a legislative body. Okay? No matter how you voted, because the vote, after the vote's taken, the quorum court speaks with one voice. That one voice, and even if you voted no, if you're a member of that body, then your voice is the voice of the whole, okay, because the majority rules on that. So yes, the county can be sued for being deliberately indifferent, but the individual quorum court member can opt out through legislative immunity, which would be an affirmative defense, okay? Now, we've had counties, for example, Sebastian County in particular, where they let their jail go to the point that finally the fire marshal came in and said, either spend $1 million and figure out how to get people out of the top floors of a downtown courthouse if it catches on fire, or we're going to shut your jail down, okay? Now, they can shut the jail down, and that would be the remedy of the state. But if you continue to operate the jail and somebody has a problem up there, then the county itself would be liable, because the county would have been deliberately indifferent to the necessary need to protect them from fire. See what I'm saying? So a lot of times that was going to force a policy issue, and that is, well, do we really want a jail on the top 2 floors of the Sebastian County Courthouse? No. So instead of wasting $1 million on putting a fire escape in, we decided we'd take that $1 million and start the concept of building a new jail. Then you get into how we're going to do that, then you get into financing, then you get into figuring out what the permissible ways are to finance county government. Okay? So it is complicated, but it's all been figured out, it all fits together, and you have people to lead you through this, okay? And the main thing I want you to realize is you're joining a team. That team's been playing a long time. It's been relatively successful, and now you, as a team member, you need to figure out what's my contribution to the team. I saw a hand over here.
Back to the sheriff's situation.
Yes, sir.
The quorum court does set the salary, is that correct?
Yes, sir. Salary of who?
Well, I was going to ask, if you reduce the sheriff's salary, you have to reduce everybody in the other offices?
Not necessarily. The elected official salaries are normally set, there's a range that's set by the legislature, and inside that range, y'all get to make certain decisions. We do have, coincidentally, some counties who are adjusting their budget, and we have people that ran for office thinking the pay was one thing. They got elected and gonna find out it's gonna be another thing, okay? In fact, one county, they found out they made a mistake, and the pay's gonna drop like 10 grand. It's like, well, wait a minute, I wouldn't have run for this office if I knew the pay was so lousy. Well, I hate that for you, but that's the way it works. Okay? So, county government is fun. I'm just telling you, it is fun. But you gotta get in the flow and to kind of begin to understand how it all works and how all the pieces fit together. It'll take you a little while on that, but it's gonna be a lot of fun for you. Page 12, real fast. Employee pay and position authority. I've got an article on that right there. On your sick leave, holiday pay, vacation leave, all that's a matter of contract, and y'all get to make decisions on that. In the employment world, as Brandy talked about earlier, you know, I think she mentioned this, there's a model of employment policy most counties use. It's provided by the Association of Arkansas Counties. It's been hammered out over the last 30 years to figure out how it all works. And sometimes there's a little dispute as to how that works. And so I've got a separate article which says county judges employment policy authority. So you see those in contrast. And why is that? Well, under Amendment 55, which is the amendment that reorganized county government, we changed the function of the county court. See, the county judge is what? He's the judge of the county court. What is the county court? It's a real, live judicial court. So your judge is a real, live judicial judge. That's not an administrative court. That is a judicial court. And it has jurisdiction, just like all the other courts have jurisdiction. And for a matter inside the jurisdiction of the county court, then the county judge is the judge of the county court. And he functions as a judge in that capacity. Well, in order to make county government work, they created an exception of the county judge and said the county judge is the chief executive officer of the county. Well, chief executive officer is different than judicial officer of the county court. So the county judge actually functions as both a judicial officer and an executive officer. And even though they amended county government to simplify county government and make it easier to administer, and one of the ways they did that was they put the county judge in the position of being the chief executive officer. So he presides over the quorum court, but he also administers the system of county roads. So when I'm talking to the county judges, I'm giving them the good news that under Arkansas law, they are the road god for counties in Arkansas. So you're dealing with somebody who's been given specific by the Constitution, a specific authority to administer the county road system. Now, also, he's an exception to the general rule that the quorum court gets to set all of the policies for everybody in the county when it comes to employment. And that article there explains Amendment 55. So there's some little unique things about county government that most people don't really understand. If you look at page 14, go down close to the bottom. This case of Horton v. Taylor, 8th Circuit Court of Appeals, that's our federal circuit court. So you start out district, circuit, and then Supreme Court. So it says the effort of another political entity, quorum court, to modify powers specifically and exclusively granted to county judge by the Arkansas Constitution must be judged in nullity. Thus, we agree with the district court that since plaintiff's employment was not under a 10-year contract, there was no clearly implied promise of continued employment. Plaintiffs had no legitimate claim of entitlement to employment. So you can actually end up in a situation where the quorum court had an employment policy for all the counties, all the employees of the county, except those that work for the county judge, and the county judge could have a different policy because of Section 3 of Amendment 55. So I just point out that there are some peculiarities out there that may not seem logical, but they are logical, okay? You have to have a county code of ordinances, and believe it or not, if you're in the risk management fund, you get that for free, okay? And so that's one of the benefits from the risk management fund. There are other wonderful benefits out there, but I'll let them tell you about that. Separation of powers doctrine on 15 again, that's really the theme of this whole discussion. And this is on 16, again, a continuation on the county judge's special powers. And let's just read that at the 16 there, under that. What I try to do is summarize these articles in the first paragraph. So it says, county judges in Arkansas are given the executive power to make discretionary decisions regarding the operation of the system of county roads. and the county judge's decision will not be changed by the courts where there's no evidence of abuse or misuse of county judge's discretion. Therefore, what does that mean? The county judge is in charge of the roads. Period. So if Quorum Court says, well, I want to come up with a road plan, that ain't gonna work. Yes, sir.
Oh, but I read another section in here that says, in the duties of the, JP, that they are responsible for, what was the, not the safety, but the peace and all those,
Well, you are as the policymaker, no doubt about it, and you can set policies as long as those policies, are general and they apply to everybody. But you cannot get in the business of trying to operate the county road system because that's been carved out and given to the county judge. It boils down to we're a small rural state and roads are very important. So historically speaking, the county judge rises based upon the citizens' perception of the county road that runs in front of their house. And so everybody basically has an opportunity to get in on the game.
so if, there is a hazard that involves life and limb,
Yes, sir.
and the county judge is not taking care of it,
Yes, sir.
that's still okay.
Well, I'm not saying it's okay. I'm saying he's the road god and it's his authority, and it's his road job to make that decision. As a citizen, you can bring that to his attention. As a quorum court, you can pass a resolution to bring it to the citizen's attention. But you couldn't get in and pass an ordinance to make him go fix it.
So what do? I guess people just get kicked.
It's called politics. Okay? Politics. All right? This is the golden triangle of county government. Are you ready for this?
I'm ready.
All right, everybody put their fingers together like this and make a triangle. The base of this triangle is the political. It's got to make political sense. This one over here make economic sense. This over here says it's got to make legal sense. So you have to run everything right through this golden triangle right here. If you can't solve it on the legal side, you can't solve it on the money side. That's your policy and purse. You're down to politics. Okay? So that's how it works.
So I guess you could, the only angle you got, or the only, avenue you got is to, somehow, hold purse.
Well, there's one other angle. You can run for county judge. That's the political side of the triangle. It's like everybody's got everybody over a barrel in this whole system, okay? But nobody has enough power to get over there and fix it. So we all got to work together in county government to make this whole thing work. And believe it or not, it's actually a lot of fun, okay? It's actually a lot of fun. And the way to do it is to do it as friends and figure out a way to make county government work. And as a court, remember you function as a body as a whole, not as individuals. And you got to do that through your appropriation powers or through your policy-making powers, through your ordinance, through your ordinances. Okay? I've even got down here where I've got discretionary authority county judge in the bottom page 16, the quorum court's road prohibitions. Okay? So that's all the stuff you can't do. And I explain that. System of county roads, you can read that for yourself, but there's some really interesting and fun stuff out there to figure out. You know, when I first kind of got left the prosecutor's office, I started out in the prosecutor's office, and when I left there, I worked for a lawyer, his name's Skip Davidson, very, very smart man. He said, look, anybody can practice law on the line. He said the fun is between the lines. So that's kind of the way it works. You got to read the law, figure out what the law says you've got to do, and say what you absolutely can't do. And in between those two things, there's a lot of things that are legal, okay? And, you know, it's how we figure out how to get the whole job done. And the beauty of Arkansas is we're pretty darn good at that, okay? We're pretty darn good at figuring out how to do something with nothing and get the whole job done. You know, Tyson Foods is a good example of that, as is J.B. Hunt, Walmart, and all the rest of them. You know, it's like a little incubator here to figure out how to solve problems. And so it's fun. It actually is fun. So bottom line is I got the shall and may road powers there, and it points out there on bottom page 17, Amendment 55, Section 1 says the quorum court may exercise local legislative authority not denied in the constitutional law, but that Section 3 says that the county judge shall operate the system of county roads. So therefore, he's the road guy. So we get down to separation of county money powers. You can appropriate but not administrate, that's on page 18. You can't do indirectly what you're prohibited from doing directly. That's trying to tie their hands so tight they can't function in the executive branch. If we get in a fuss, we gotta go to the judicial branch and let them decide whether you've exceeded your powers, okay? When it comes to county property, it's complicated as well. The county judge is the custodian of county property. But the problem is, you got elected officials that are using the property, the county judge is the custodian, okay? He's the custodian of the police vehicles in the sheriff's office. But the sheriff obviously has to administer the day-to-day affairs of the sheriff's office. He's got to use those vehicles. He's got to use the jail. He's got to use the sheriff's office, okay? So they have powers within their authority to administer the day-to-day affairs of the office. They don't have power to go beyond the administration of the day-to-day affairs of the office. And then the court, you're in the position where you can adopt policy. Your policy can apply to property, but it's got to be uniform. It's got to be something that applies across the board. You can't pick out one elected official and decide you don't like the way they're doing it. You're going to come up with a set of policy just for that elected official. So I've got examples there on office hours and smoking. So for example, you can impose the hours that the sheriff's office will be open or the clerk's office will be open, and they can't stop you from doing that. But you can't go over there and tell them what they're going to do during their open hours. And the county judge is the contracting officer for the county. Okay, he gets to pick the vendors. He gets to sign the contracts. So when the sheriff has got vendors over there blowing in his ear, because you got a lot of them blowing in his ear, and they come in here and say, we got this fancy telephone system and we want you to adopt, and it's going to generate a revenue stream, it's going to go in your radio account, it's all going to be wonderful, it's going to create funds and stuff like that. The sheriff cannot sign that contract because the sheriff is not the contracting authority for the county. He's got to go to the county judge and he asks the county judge, and the county judge agrees that this is a good idea for the county. Okay? So the contracting powers belong to the county judge. And as a legislative branch, you can't tell him who he's going to contract with. Okay? So for example, you might pass an order to say we're going to have a county civil attorney, but you don't get to pick the county civil attorney. Okay? You get to fund the position, but if you try to change the funding based on who was chosen, then you would have gone too far. You can't do that because now you're doing indirectly what you can't do directly. Okay? You love it, don't you? See, I'll get a seminar before you run for county. Alright, so now we're down to the County Grievance Committee. That's a tool we use to solve problems because employment problems, there are lots of them and they're very, very expensive to solve. And so we have a way of solving those problems, which is also has to be constitutional, because everything you do in county government has to follow a hearing process, okay? In other words, the government must humble itself and hear both sides of the story before it makes a final decision that deprives somebody of life, liberty, or property. When you think of life, liberty, or property, don't think of three things, think of three bundles of things, okay? Life is a bundle. It's a bundle of sticks you get to hold. Property is a bundle, and liberty is a bundle. So for example, you might have a probable cause to arrest somebody, but you might have a probable cause to continue to detain them. That's another stick in the bundle. So what we have to do, we have to figure out how to sort all this out. The way we sort all this out is through a process. That process is in your policy, which you've already adopted, which is your county employment policy. It sets up a county employment grievance hearing process, and we go through that. And I just want to point out, bottom page 21 on the right-hand side there, D, when you're going through that process, if you happen to be on the committee, which in many counties is the whole court, and it says the County Grievance Committee is not to substitute its operational judgment for that of an elected official if the decision of the county official does not violate the Constitution or the law. So you may have situations where you think it's a completely stupid idea for the elected official to choose to terminate somebody's employment, but that's not the criteria. Because if it were the criteria, then we'd be allowing the legislative branch to substitute its operational judgment for that of the executive branch, okay? But you weren't elected to be in the executive branch. So what you have to do is decide whether the decision is falling in one of the ditches, the illegal ditch or the unconstitutional ditch. You can't come in and say, if I was the elected official, I would have done it differently, because you just exceeded your authority, okay? So your necessary funding duties, bottom page 23. I've got general fund there, county road fund there. It's very, 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 very important that you realize that your budgeting duty is a mandatory duty. We've had courts bow up and not want to adopt an annual budget and actually had to be sued by the county judge in the local circuit court to make them perform their non-discretionary duty by the end of the year. By the time it got explained to them that that's what was gonna happen, of course, they had a session, they adopted a budget, and if you don't like the budget adopted, then, you know, you can go through the process of amending it and changing it, and modifying and doing all the stuff you can do using your appropriation powers, but you have to do that. Why do you have to do that? Because the act of adopting the budget is the act of levying those taxes and saying, this is how much we're gonna spend this year, okay? So you have to have a county road fund budget, you gotta have a county general budget. Why? They're two different funds, because we separate those funds, because county roads are so historically important in Arkansas, and that again is why the county judge is the road god, and he gets to spend the county road fund money. And basically, your only real recourse is to not levy the taxes next year. That gets you back into the political branch, or the political side of the golden triangle, which is all your citizens want a really, really nice road right in front of their house, okay? So, be very aware of overtime, comp time, that's real debt. You need to be looking at that stuff. You need to be asking your treasurer, how much do we owe in comp time debt? Because when they leave, that turns into cash, okay? So if you have a change in administration, they decide to fire 6 people at one time, all that comp time, boom, just turned into cash. Now, we have a 120-hour limit in most policies on how much comp time you can accrue. You need to keep your eye on that ball too, because the law actually allows you to accrue for police and fire up to 460 hours, I believe it is, maybe 400, I think 480 hours, okay? Well, that's nuts. And so what we do is we try to make it work, so we put a limit out there of 120 hours, because it's their job to administer that comp time. They can make people use their comp time. Do not allow them to run up a debt that you're gonna have to pay. Because when that employee leaves, they're gonna come over their handout, you're gonna have to find the money and appropriate the money, and the problem is there's not enough money, and we can't operate in a deficit position, so we have to rob Peter in order to pay Paul, okay? So keep your eye on that ball, and yes, you can have county liability question over here, that's explained on page 28. And I'm back to those county boards. My advice is to be very careful about creating county public facility boards. That becomes a kingdom that will rise up and bite you down the road, because that is creating another governmental entity. If it has any contract, then you cannot uncreate it, because it will impair a contract, and that in itself is unconstitutional. And the only other thing I want to say in the 30 seconds I have left is your funding duties. Let me go back and find that real fast. It's a, here, let's see. Oh, here it is. I missed it. Page 21. Fundamental county finance rules. Real fast. No deficit spending. No multi-year county contracts. No binding the hands of future officials. No county loans and no county gifts. Okay? Now, you can't have county loans under Amendment 78, for example, because you have to have specific statutory authority. But no county gifts, that's something you need to think about. The county cannot give away county property. Okay? You can't donate to the community chest, for example. Okay? That's illegal, because you're giving away county property. You can cut a deal with somebody where it's not a gift, there's consideration coming back and forth, and the consideration doesn't have to be equal. But no county gifts, that's a baseline provision that we use. And when you get to the end administration, you want to tie the hands of the incoming executive branch officials. You can't do that either, because county government operates no deficit by fiscal year, 1 year at a time. And if you have these long-term, anytime you see a multi-year county contract, you need to ask some hard questions, because by and large, county government rises and falls 1 year at a time, year by year by year by year. So you see all these things inside these contracts to not violate that provision. I'm out of time. Go ahead.
Okay, on the year by year, does that count for money that a bank agrees to pay you a certain rate for savings?
Well, that's on them, okay? But it's not a problem until it's a problem. But multi-year, here's the problem where multi-year contracts come into play, is that when you go from administration to administration, like a lot of times court will want to come in, they're going to cut all these deals. They're going to set up a board, and they're going to pick somebody to administer this, and thinking that they can tie the hands. You can't tie the hands of future officials. But yes, every contract has to be fiscal year by fiscal year. Most of them roll over unless you specifically choose to opt out. That's how we get around. I don't have time, Lindsay will shoot me if I go any further, so. I will hang around, answer any questions. She said I can answer more questions. Anybody else got a question? Okay?
If I understand you correctly, a while ago, you said that if a new elected official comes in and say the outgoing official is at the top of the salary, and so, you know, the minimum maximum sets. So, during budget time, we decide to cut that salary to, with the.
If it doesn't violate state law,
It
then
doesn't.
you set the budget.
So if a new person coming in, we decide that, all right, we're gonna lower that salary, if a new
Here's
elected
what
officials.
happens, here's what happens, you can't do indirectly what you can't do directly, so if you're doing that to punish them, because you don't like them, or you don't, if they're not the right political flavor, then you'd be prohibited from doing it, you say, I would never do that, but what they're gonna do is they're gonna accuse you of doing that, we're gonna have a lawsuit, we're all gonna end up in the newspaper, and it's gonna be a political problem.
So you have to set the standard of all new incoming would be at the at a certain range.
Well, something like that.
You set a standard all the way across.
Boy, don't you love quorum court members, first thing I wanna do, cut those salaries. My advice, don't make any changes quick. Think this stuff through and think about the ripple effect, but I'm gonna tell you, everything you do in county government, it either has a political tone, a political overtone, or political undertone, okay? It's all politics at the end of the day. That's not a bad thing, that's just the nature of the beast, okay?